Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Camera Life podcast, proudly brought to you by Lucky Straps, makers of fine leather camera straps out of Bendigo, Victoria. It is Thursday, the 15th of May. The year is marching along. Speaking of marches, we're on the march to 2,000 subscribers. So if you're watching or listening, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe and tickle the bell so that you get notifications, because sometimes we do random crazy stuff. Speaking of random crazy stuff, we are joined today by a special guest who isn't new to the show because he's been on countless times sharing his opinions.
Greg's
not
counting, but that's okay.
Yeah, really not.
Countless?
Again?
I think it was 2 times, but they were 2 good times.
That feels countless. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, mate. How are you?
Good to have you on the show. Back on the show.
Back on the show
yet again.
That's it. I'm looking forward to the YouTube comments this time round as well. I might even get a chance to read them.
We had some crackers on Monday night. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Actually, there's one we talked about Monday night. We might have to bring that back up later in the show, but we'll save it.
I think we will. Obviously, Matt's with us, but we're also joined by our glorious leader, Justin Castles.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello, mate.
I'm great. How are you guys? I've actually got an applause sound, Matt, if you want me to really get in there and
well, it would help to be my backup dancer support act, yeah.
No, I've lost it. She gone. I don't know. Hang on, I got it.
Hey,
morning, everybody.
I prefer the scream.
Yeah, I'll hold back on that one today.
We've got a few people joining us already in the chat. Can I say some hellos, Justin?
Yelena wanted to know if we'd be on time today. I think we're pretty close. Not too bad. She says, good morning all. Philip Johnson says, morning, chaps. Dennis Smith from the School of Light says, I took my kids out of school for this one.
That's commitment.
He also says he says you've been working out, Matt.
Actually, no. I got a haircut, which does dramatic wonders. I can highly recommend it. It's the easiest weight loss technique around.
I might try that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have a lot of hair to lose on my face.
You might maybe a beard trim, Greg. A little beard trim.
A beard trim.
The haircut, Greg. If you got dunked in the water, you'd come out looking like this little stick with just like mounds of like wet hair.
Yeah,
like a cat when you give a cat a bath and they're like a long-haired cat and they're just tiny.
Yeah. Well, if people want to pay good money to see that, just head to my OnlyFans.
We've also got Digifrog, Dave Clark in the chat says morning all. He says GFX talk all day, please, because I did.
Well, we will get to that.
I did tease that. Yeah.
There it is.
We will be we'll be figuring out why Matt made the strange decision to change up his camera kit, but we'll save that for later in the show because that'll keep you guys watching for a while, and that's how YouTube works. Hey, also. If you are watching, hey, hit the little like button. Apparently that really helps as well for this episode.
Also subscribe, isn't it? Isn't that a thing?
I said that already. And tickle the bell.
Already done. I like because Greg's saying we're on the march to 2,000, but don't tell anyone we're at 1,050. So it's like it's a long when someone's like, goals. Oh, I'm almost this, and you're like, you're not quite. We're getting there.
But you know what, though? It is called Star Wish thinking, isn't it? Where you picture, you think it, you envisage it, and then it just happens.
Yeah, it's on my vision board. It's right here. Anyway, speaking of visionary people, we are joined today by Matt Krumins, who is an award-winning nature, wildlife, underwater, commercial photographer. He also does a lot of workshops. He's also 50% of the brains, if you could say that, behind BFOP.
I would have thought about that, but yeah, that's all right.
BFOP being the Bright Festival of Photography, just for any of you, the guys that are new.
or
that's
not
what,
from
that's what BFOP
Victoria.
stands for. You'll probably hear that word a little bit in this show as well. We'll try and get some secrets out of Matt later in the show about what might be coming up for this year's BFOP.
Yeah.
We could plan it together on this episode.
We'll just make it happen.
Yeah. So Matt, we're gonna dive into everything about you, and I think I pre-warned you prior to the show that we will discover when you last wet the bed. But aside from that, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just give us a brief introduction of who is Matt Krumins.
Me. My history in photography goes back a really, really, really long way. It's a very, 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 very kind of long, drawn-out story, but it can be condensed down to the fact that I was in video production. I was always one of those kids who loved techie stuff, like when digital cameras, like digital video cameras first came out, and they weren't digital really at all. They were kind of like those little tapes, but you could digitize them into a computer. Like I thought that was just amazing.
Wow.
And so I sort of got very involved in video, which led me to working straight out of school in the field in kind of like, what would you call it? Like stage production, so like big concerts and events and stuff like that, doing the audio visual stuff, and then producing a lot of the video content that went in behind them. One of those kids that kind of like, I was quite ambitious and always wanted to do something different and big, and so kind of went down that path, and throughout my career of snaking and weaving through things, I kind of realized that photography was a big part of it. I think the main factor in photography, the move to photography from videography, was actually when I started scuba diving. I had a pretty bad relationship breakup when I was like 18, and I might have been older than that, probably older than that. Anyway, I started up scuba diving really seriously, and all my mates thought I was crazy because Victoria's cold, and they didn't see what was in it. And so I thought, well, hell, I've got to have a camera. And so that was kind of the start of it, and realizing, I guess, very soon after that, social media was just becoming a thing, and Facebook didn't like video at the time, which is ironic. They only liked photos. And so I was very video unfriendly, and so moved to photography. And then, I've sort of flip-flopped backwards and forwards through, and now I do both. But I worked for Olympus for a while. I was an ambassador for their underwater products for a while there. I've been around the block. I've shot on every camera brand except for Ricoh. Sorry, Ricoh. Sorry, that's
not yet. You haven't, not yet.
Tax as well. My passion's really in sort of nature photography, and I think that comes from the fact that it's more unpredictable. It's less repeatable. There's something about looking, especially when you do this for a living, there's something bad about looking at photographs from really popular places and realizing you've just shot the same album as someone else because that was the place to stand for a landscape. And that was the time of day. And, I look at Carragini. I'm actually looking at a photo of Carragini on my wall right now going, I've seen that photo like 1,000 times. And whilst I'm kind of proud of my version, it doesn't really feel like it's kind of mine. It feels like it's a moment in time. It's a holiday shot now. Whereas, the other wildlife stuff that I've got, irrespective of whether someone's seen that moment before or whatnot, the likelihood that they've caught that exact thing is so unlikely. And there's a uniqueness that comes with that, which I really appreciate.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very good. And I think it's a good point about, sorry, I cut you off.
No, not at all. Like that, I could, as I said, this can go forever, and I appreciate people's time.
Well, just as well I cut you off. So it's an interesting point about that moment in time, and that yes, we could all stand in the same place, even at a really popular landscape destination. But I think that sometimes the key difference is the experience that you had in the lead up to taking the photo and the after. It's not just about that final image on the wall, though, is it? I mean, that is obviously the end product. That's what we're aiming for, is that image on the wall. But there's also that experience of, well, I traveled to the middle of Africa to get this shot, and that was fucking amazing. Like do you find that, does it elevate that experience for you, or the final product for you, that you can cast your mind back and recall where you were and who you were with when you took those shots?
I'll be honest with you, my memory is really bad.
Okay. They're gonna buy you and send you a notebook.
I totally agree. I totally agree with the idea of that, and I think for most people that is absolutely true. There is something that emotionally attaches you to those images, and certainly there are some photos I've got where I'm going, I really, really feel that. I think that something I'm realizing about myself, and this is probably going to bleed into our GFX conversation shortly, something I've really noticed about myself in the last probably year or two, to be honest, is that life has actually stabilized a little bit. I started my business full-time 2016. I quit my job at Olympus at the Christmas party at about 2 a.m. Went out on my own the next morning going, oh, what do I do now? And that was a really interesting ride for the first like 3 years. It was like, cool, wow, this is a whole new world. I've always had a little business on the side, but never anything serious that was meant to be a full-time wage. Things grew really quickly. They went really well. We started to hit into 2019. I really got my groove. I started running overseas trips. We hit COVID, and that obviously like flipped everything on its head. Like, I don't need to even say that to people, probably me less than a lot of others. The years following was all kind of how do we rebuild, and how do we rebuild with all the new expectations that we've set. And it's probably only this year, or maybe last year, mid last year to now, where I've sort of gone, wow, things are actually normal now. Like, this is what normal looks like. And I've realized that I think that I have got to change the way that I see things, because I realize that I've been so privileged and lucky to have been to all these places, done all these things, shot all these moments, like photographing humpback whales, point blank range in Tonga for 7 days, like I've done that twice. And yeah, I look at the photos and it brings me back to that place, but it sort of doesn't. My brain moves to the next thing because I'm in this problem solving mode still from day one, where the startup phase, you're like, cool, that's working, great, what next? Oh, cool, that's working, what next? Oh crap, COVID, what next? Oh no, we're getting back to normality, what next? And now I'm kind of popping out the other side going, oh my God, like I feel like I haven't lived through a lot of these things. I feel like I've collected a lot of souvenirs along the way, but I don't necessarily feel what you're talking about at this point. And that's probably why I've had a remarkable change in the last couple of months, because I'm really trying to analyze this, because it's quite terrifying when you look back at all these moments and you go, like, I don't have, the whole picture there. My brain was moving too fast. I was always into the next thing already. And so maybe that's where photography has been a really big passion of mine, is it's my way of actually looking back and having moments, because I'm always, 2 steps ahead of myself.
Yeah. A follow-up question on that, Matt. Do you think that there's, given how much you do, and for other photographers, we've talked to Tom and Dennis, both have traveled extensively, and many of our other guests, is there a level of desensitization to the wonders that you experience? Because, you talk about a 7-day underwater photography excursion to Tonga to photograph, was it blue whales or humpbacks?
Humpbacks, yeah.
Humpbacks. And you've done it twice. For many people, just being able to get to that once might be at the top of their bucket list, and they might be lucky to do it in their lifetime. But you have these sorts of adventures on an ongoing basis, moving from one thing to the next. Is there a level of desensitization there for you?
I'm reminded about that quite frequently by my wife. Yeah, I think that there is a it's not desensitization. I think it just becomes a little bit more normal, which I guess you could describe as desensitization. That doesn't mean it's less exciting and interesting and everything when you're there. That doesn't mean you don't go there and you're like, ugh, more whales. Like that's not in the world.
Endangered species.
Yeah, but I think, as you say, it's more that you'll go and do one of these amazing adventures, and I highly recommend it to anyone who's keen. I went. I was lucky enough. Scott Portelli invited me along because he had a spot that I could jump in on. If you're ever keen on it, jump on one of Scott's trips. But like you do go there, and I think that for me, it's not desensitization to the experience. I think it's more that, in my mind, I've been lucky enough to have this situation where I don't ever feel like that's the last adventure. The bucket list isn't a bucket list because I don't think the bucket just, there's always gonna be something more on the bucket or in the bucket or that I want to put in the bucket. I don't have that end goal in mind, because I think as a photographer, you are in a way forced to constantly chase new experiences. I mean, that's the nature of needing to produce new and different work. And then when you actually hit the point where you have the ability or you have the opportunities to go and make the most of these moments, you could probably say it's desensitization, because you're on that whale trip, and then on the next thing I'm thinking is, cool, I'm here now, it's August, but what's happening next in like September or October? And so it's not that you don't appreciate what you're doing. I think it's more just that you need to be forward thinking. And I think when things start happening in a photographer's world, we discussed this a little bit on sort of Saturday night, when things actually start happening, you don't have time to just stop all the time. You don't have time to stop and process it all and analyze it all. And, you can be grateful for it, but it doesn't rock your world every time. You're always needing to think forwards. And I think that's probably where it comes from a little bit. And to me, that's where wildlife is really, I think, again, it kind of comes back to that importance of, you can have moments that just happen out of nowhere. You can't plan them. You can't predict them. these things just happen. And they probably are those little punctuations in my life where I go, do I remember the whole of the first time I went to Africa? Absolutely not. Do I remember what day I shot that photo? Absolutely not. Do I remember exactly where we drove? No, I don't. Do I remember the place? No, not entirely. But there are certain moments that are attached to photos where I go, that was the punctuation in that trip. It might only have taken 1/640th of a second, but that is my memory of that trip now. And so my experience is probably less of the, oh, wow, 7 whole days. I'm probably in my head going, there was probably 47 seconds across 7 days that I won't forget,
Yeah. No, and I think that's important when you condense that experience into something really, really pure that will stick with you as well. And just want to roll back a tiny bit for something you said about, we talked on Saturday night. People who are watching and listening, we're referring to the BFOP day event / Camera House Croydon 40th birthday festival. I'm going to call it a festival because it was crazy. But we talked a lot about that on Monday on our random photography show Monday night. Justin and I unpacked that whole crazy, wonderful, magical experience. So please,
if you could chat GPT summarize unpacking it, because I haven't unpacked it yet, and that would save me a lot of time.
Yeah, sure. We'll send you some notes. Go back and watch that or listen to that episode, guys, because it was such a phenomenal day. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
Just quickly, a couple more people in the chat. Tim Siamas, who was there on Saturday. David Mascaro from San Francisco, who was not there. What's up, fellas? What's up, David?
I love that. You're using a US accent, though, like a San Francisco accent. Give it a crack.
I can't really. No, I can't do it. I've got nothing. San Francisco. No.
You're asking one of the Aussiest blokes I know to put it on an American accent.
San Francisco, mate. And David said, did I miss the part where he said he uses Nikon? You did. He probably has used it in the past, but currently, no, not a Nikon man.
Yeah. No, I was a D850, D750 and D850 and D810 user for probably 3 or 4 years.
Some of the
2.8, all the bells and whistles. Yeah.
Some of the finest cameras, the D850 especially.
That was the biggest work. You know what? That has the one feature that all cameras are missing, and that is it had buttons with lights in them. So you could turn the lights on and you could see all the buttons. And I'm like, why do they not just do that? That should just be a normal thing in every freaking camera.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Oh, more people joining the chat. The drunk wedding photographer from LA, Moshi. And David said he's out. He only listens to Nikon photographers, so he's gone.
Levin, just lost a subscriber.
Levin from Review Photography says, "G'day guys, finally made a live cast. Finally, woo!"
Yeah, Levin's just returned from a trip overseas.
Oh, right.
He's only just gotten back, and he shot me an email, and he had catastrophic weather, I think, from memory the whole time.
Ooh.
So great to have you on board, Levin.
Yes, good to see you. Fleur Ferguson is here, and. The drunk wedding photographer says, I keep missing the lives because of all the time changes. Yeah, daylight savings and all sorts of stuff. It's been
just hit the notification bell. It'll tell you.
Yeah. And we've been a little bit random lately, which is kind of how we do things.
Also, what's the most important episode? That's the important thing, isn't it?
That's right. This is the one. They're all here for you.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit. But first, I also want to see, Greg, is your mic working? You sound a little non-micy. Give it a tap. I don't think that's on, buddy. No, you're on computer audio. So while you fix that up, I'm going to ask Matt. So you were doing video stuff, and then you bought a camera to document your scuba adventures.
Yeah.
How did that evolve to starting from taking a few shots underwater to the point where at some point in that you built a relationship with Olympus for that underwater photography. Talk to us about that time.
Is that any better? Sorry to interrupt.
Give it a tap.
Give it a tap. No.
It is not.
No. But it's a good prop.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's cardboard. It's actually 2D.
Greg said, can we get a mic? I was like, nah, just make one.
Yeah, that's it.
We can't afford that. Tell us, Matt, how'd you go from basically like, all right, I just want to take some shots while I'm underwater to becoming essentially, I guess, a photographer?
Yeah, it's a pretty. I mean, it was a long story in a way. Like I bought like a pretty rubbish camera at the beginning because at the time there's only rubbish cameras out there. I shot a lot of stuff for the club, and this is over a long period of time as well, right? So I shot a lot of photography for the dive club, and at the time, because cameras were so expensive, like no one would have a DSLR underwater at the time. It was like point and shoots were a thing. If you're a full-on pro, maybe like the guys in the Philippines and stuff, they would have a DSLR. Maybe some of the US guys, but it wasn't really a thing, at least not mainstream. Like if you went to all the camera clubs in Melbourne, the underwater, dive clubs in Melbourne, you'd maybe find one person who had enough to have a DSLR. So my stuff looked pretty retrospectively embarrassing. So I got a bit of traction there, and I was a dive instructor at the club and stuff. So there was already kind of this level of, I had a bit of a leadership role in that photography space because I was sort of one of the first ones in our club to take it somewhat seriously. I had a background in video already, and I had an interest in that tech photography stuff. And so as time went on, I bought myself a video camera. I moved to Thailand and for it was only like 6 months or something, but I did my dive instructing over there and ended up doing a lot of underwater photography over there. I kind of did my instructorship and then taught a little bit and then realized I'd like just diving every day, taking photos and videos. Again, looking back, they're horrendously bad, but at the time, I guess they were good. And then came back to Melbourne after that stint and realized that actually I wanted to take something seriously. Like I was floating a little bit. I had a job. I was working. I think I was working when I came back. I was working at Editel, which was is a post-production firm doing TV production and stuff. And they had some photography opportunities. But I wanted to start taking my own stuff a bit more seriously. And so I decided that I'd buy myself a camera, like a proper big person camera. And this was my first move into like adulthood, my mid-20s. And
I was going to say, you're mid-20s at this point, and you were...
Well, probably something like that, yeah. It would have been mid-20s. And so I basically bought a Panasonic GH2, which was one of the very first kind of serious mirrorless cameras, well known for its video at the time, which was a really big appeal to me. And I bought some nice lenses, bought a Nauticam housing, which was it's like the Rolls Royce of underwater housings. Pretty incredible things. They're incredibly expensive though.
I was going to say, do you remember roughly what they cost back then? Like how big of an investment was the housing?
So I don't remember the exact of the housing, but I'm pretty sure the whole kit together, including a couple of flashes, the housing, the camera, the lenses, all the bells and whistles that went with it, I'm pretty sure it cost me like 15 or 16,000.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, at the time especially, it was a lot of money. And especially for my age, it was a ridiculous amount of money. Like it was an uncomfortable investment, and I borrowed some money from the parents to do it. But I thought if I'm going to do it properly, because the thing with underwater housing is a bit like real, other cameras. If you buy the cheaper one, it probably costs you 50%. If you can rummage up the extra 50% of the money, you'll get the top end. It's sort of like the entry level is such a high bar anyway. If you can afford to push it up, you get a lot more bang for your buck just by going that bit further. So the joke of this was that I actually then started shooting, and of course it completely changed my photography. Like I was getting some really good shots, even shots that today I'm really proud of. And even the first like 3 or 4 weeks of it, my mum sent me this, it must have been an email or something. So I don't think we had image text back then, or maybe it was an image of MMS. But,
MMS, yeah, exactly.
Remember those? Yeah. And it was of an article in the paper that was, Olympus had an underwater photography competition and they were looking for an ambassador. And so I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Of course, I've got no chance of winning this. I'm a bit of a hack. Like, I might be a little experienced, but there's people out there who are like been doing this a long time. Really, it's a pretty big thing. And the prize was an ambassadorship, a camera rig, and a trip to the Solomon Islands on a private island just with yourself a week. And anyway, I thought, well, stuff it, I'll enter in anyway. So I put my stuff in. You had to have a portfolio of 5 shots, which I thought was clever. Rather than just being an image competition where you could luck it, you had to have a portfolio, which sort of meant that, you could stand up to, different situations. Anyway, I got the call and, I'd won this ambassadorship, which was pretty exciting. I met up with the rep down in Melbourne. It wasn't the rep, the marketing person who came down to Melbourne. We went to a pub and we got chatting and, it was all congratulations. And then they broke the fantastic news that I'd won this, the camera, and the camera was their entry level EPL 3, which is like their lowest end mirrorless camera at the time. and with the lowest end housing and really, really small flash units. And I had this really sort of instant regret of realizing I've just spent nearly, $15,000-$16,000 on this Panasonic kit, which I'm no longer allowed to use because I have to be shooting on Olympus. And the one they've given me is like about 10% of the capacity or capability of the one I've just bought. Oh. And so, I only sold that. I don't even think I sold it. I think I gave it to someone like a few years ago because I just couldn't bring myself to get rid of it straight away. And of course, I upgraded my Olympus stuff pretty quickly. I said, can I chip in some money and get a bigger camera, bigger housing? I got the EM5, then a bigger housing for it, then a dome port, and all the bells and whistles. And they looked after me in that space. But yeah, that was kind of the conversion to Olympus. Was this, I guess, very sad kind of win, which, yeah, I mean, it was good. Like, don't get me wrong, without that, I wouldn't be doing what I am today. But it was an interesting concept because at the time, I sort of felt like the world ended a little bit.
Was the private island? Was the private island also? Was it just like a small raft somewhere that they tied up or something? It was like
it was actually a swimming pool that was called the Solomon Island Resort. No, it was. It was actually. It was really good. I've been there a couple of times. It's a place called Fuji. It is a private island that's run by some Aussies, and the reason it was a private island at the time was they were doing renovations on some of their the cottages, so most of it was shut down. But from my experience, I still got to hang out and have the place to myself. I had a private boat. Or there might have been one other guy on the island at the time because I took some shots with another dude in it. But yeah, anyway, that was magical, and that was a really good opportunity, and it was sort of probably set off that time in my life where you could travel on someone else's dollar. Back in the days pre-COVID, before influencers took over the world, where you wanted to go somewhere in the world and you'd put it on Facebook and you get resorts contacting you, and then an airline would tell you, "Oh, we'll pay for the flights if you take some photos of the airplane," and and all that. So it's been a really interesting ride through very, very changing times, stuff that you can't replicate now.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Dennis says that I introduced him to Olympus. That's right, because I wine and dined Dennis in Adelaide when I was an Olympus rep and got him across the line.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
He seems very happy. He seems very happy.
That's it. Yeah.
So Matt, just want to dial back a little bit further. Growing up, did you have an artistic family or an arts or business background? Because you're a very business savvy individual, having gotten to know you, especially since BFOP. Was there that sort of influence in your life, or was it a mentor or someone that sort of pointed you in the right direction?
Yeah, probably a combination. Like, I came from a really artistic family. Mum's an artist, a very well-known oil painter. If you want to see her Instagram, it's like Krumins Art on Insta. Or if you look up Gwen Krumins, you'll find her on there anyway. So she's an incredibly talented oil painter and runs classes as well. My dad was, he worked at Scotch. He was a music teacher. I wouldn't say that he's a passionate musician, but he was definitely, he's a musician. And so he had an artistic family, which I think really gave me the license to say, this is a valid career. I think that's something a lot of people lack, is that you don't need someone to say it, but it's growing up seeing that that's a really valid thing. I think most people probably grow up thinking that a career in any kind of arts or creative space is like for the people who didn't make it in the other space. And I didn't grow up with that mentality at all. I grew up thinking that was totally normal, and that, that there's we had a great life growing up. We traveled a lot. My parents have been really successful with the way that they've built their lives. And so it never felt like it was the backstop or the second rate. So that was one thing. And from a business perspective, again, like a lot of encouragement in that space. I think they kind of knew from an early age I was really interested in business. I had my first business at 12, which was one of my more succccessful businesses, ironically.
And you're still chasing that thrill all these years later.
I had my first million at 13.
12-year-old self. Yeah. I actually did. So I got asked by a family friend to convert some of their old Super 8 video footage back to at the time it was to VHS. And I said, I don't know how to do that. But of course I was the techie kid. So they were like, well, you can work it out. And we ended up working out that they had an old projector as well. I had a new video camera. It wasn't digital at the time, but I could hook it up to the VCR. So I essentially projected their Super 8 videos onto my bedroom wall, which wasn't painted specially or smooth or anything. It was just projected onto a wall that was whitish. And I filmed it with a video camera, and I plugged a CD player into the, the RCA inputs. I had a CD player plugged into the audio and the camera's video plugged in. So I did these kind of like hack edit jobs of all their Super 8 films.
Nice.
And then their friends and their friends' friends came out of the woodwork. Oh, we've got lots of those. And it kind of grew. My dad did a 5,000 copies at work of an ad that I made up in PowerPoint. And we I got some friends to do a mail drop in the area. And I ended up getting Kodak Australia as one of my clients. And they were sending it from Sydney for a 12-year-old to film on the wall, which they didn't realize at the time, but there was no one else really doing it. And it was only when Mum answered the phone one day and they asked for me. It was like a Tuesday, and she knew the drill, but and said, no, he's not here. He's at school. And they said, what are you talking about at school? And she blew the lid that I was 12 years old in grade 6, and that. Anyway, I had a big box of film that was sitting in my bedroom ready to go. And I think that was the last batch that I ever got sent down. But it kind of, I was always encouraged to do that kind of stuff. I think that there are some kids that you can see have that interest in that entrepreneurial streak. And then, others are, are very fixated on a particular thing. And I was always the floater who would look for opportunities. So, yeah. And then growing up, I think you naturally start bumping into those people. I had some really awesome mentors in my first jobs that probably showed me that what's possible, and the way that they carried themselves, and the sort of conversations they had with people, and the things that they said yes to. And then we'd get back to the office and I'd be like, why did you say yes to that? And they were like, well, we can work it out, can't we? And I was like, wow, okay, that's a thing. Adults do that too, right? Yeah. And so, that's probably the background. But yeah, hi Nick Fletcher. I know you've been.
Yeah, Nick's in the chat. He says, "Don't panic, I'm here now." Has he mentioned me yet?
Yeah,
he has not.
There's another one of those mentors in my life. It's caused me no end of no.
And just for those of you watching or listening along, Nick Fletcher is the wouldn't say the other half, but the other 50% of the BFOP Brains Trust. And we'll get to BFOP in a little bit, because we want to, I guess, discover more about that side of what you do. Justin, I think you've been scribbling down some questions for Matt.
I have notes. Number one. No. What I want to know, so basically you entrepreneurial spirit from a young age, and then rocked around scubaing and just living the dream for a while, and then won a competition with Olympus for a very average camera kit, and then parlayed that into a good camera kit, and then a job. Parlayed that into a full-time job with them, essentially?
Yeah.
Did that evolve naturally?
Not really. No, I pushed that pretty hard. I was working in a job that I enjoyed, but I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do. I've always known that I wanted to run my own thing. And I think that Olympus was kind of like getting into that space of, it's where my passion is. I think one thing I've been really fortunate is I'm pretty good at seeing a dead end road. I've managed to sort of see the writing on the wall for many, many businesses I've worked in. And I have moved around a lot to sort of see what's happening in 2 years' time, where's this going in 5 years, and to know when to call it quits and find that new thing. Hence why I don't work for Olympus anymore. I saw the writing on the wall. I saw the way that I was carrying myself, where my passion was, my passion wasn't. And so I started pushing Olympus pretty hard. The issue is that my job that I wanted wasn't a real job. I wanted to just go and take pictures, and that's not a real job. And so they kind of created a role at the time, which was called a retail development manager. And it was a 50-50 role, managing the Adelaide or repping the Adelaide stores, and then being this retail development manager, which is essentially someone who comes up with interesting ways to sell people kit, interesting ideas, very left of center ways to promote stuff, kind of like marketing, but more from a retailer perspective. How do we get retail staff on board with this rather than how do we get customers on board with it? And so my job was then to use that entrepreneurial brain to kind of go, well, how do we reimagine the way that we talk to people? Because Olympus at the time, and probably still to this day, I'm going to call them the underdogs in a way, because, you know, there's a lot of things that people can say about the Olympus system that is kind of that compromise. I certainly don't see it as a compromise, but I think in the industry, it's still seen as though it's the smaller sensor, it's the smaller kit, you can spin that to a positive thing, or you can spin that into like that doesn't sound as good. And so my job was to go, how do we get retail staff to embrace this and realize that actually all of the things that they might instinctively say, how can we spin that into a positive and make them, you know, want to pick up the product and give it a shot? Because that's they weren't doing it necessarily. And, you know, hence with Dennis, you know, my project was great. How do we engage this person who's a really successful photographer who's got this style and they've got all these things? And Olympus happened to have a tool we built into the camera, that live composite and live time that was there. And so, you know, how do I go and get him on board? Because if I get him on board, then we can get the next guys on board. And yeah, it was an interesting time. Most of my life back then was, you know, we go hot air ballooning and go-karting and boating, and we did all sorts of crazy stuff. I had a very long leash, which was
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where we're starting to see some of the, I guess, the ideas evolve in your events that you and Nick organise, that sort of come from this thinking outside the box to create great experiences for people. You're trying to create a great experience to, I guess, build a brand and build relationships with retailers and photographers. And now it's just gone to just full on great experiences.
Great experiences though. I mean, keep in mind, you know, what you said at the start, Greg, around like, you know, do you get desensitized to all these cool trips and things like that you get to do? And you know, I think in a way, like this is almost a way of us bringing people along for that ride. People who live relatively, I'll call it normal lives, who don't necessarily do some of the cool stuff we get to do. This is our way of giving opportunity for people to kind of peek inside and go, wow, like you can do this stuff. Like this is actually possible. It's just that most of us not brought up being told it's possible. And most of us don't think to go and do the silly because we're meant to be very serious adults and stuff. So yeah, I think that I've been given a lot of opportunities from very early on to be like, hey, find the most ridiculous thing. And you know, one of the best lines that I've ever been given was from Fuji. I think I said this last podcast, that they said to me, when I asked them, you know, what budget was for a certain project, they said, oh, how about you come up with the most ridiculous thing you can, and then at least we know what we're saying no to. And I love that concept where it's like, think really big and then work out what's possible. Don't think about what's possible and then work out what you can do within that box, because, you know, you're always going to shortchange yourself.
Yeah. I love that. True. And that's an amazing thing for a brand to step up and say. It's very cool. Couple of chats. Nick says he's drafting off my coolness.
The fact that you use the word Nick says it all. But anyway,
he's also says I'm 90% of the brain's trust, not 50%, and he says love you like a brother.
Only 10%, not
10% of love.
Dennis is in the chat, and he says a long leash.
We had a very long leash.
Referring to Olympus time. So
can I say the longest leash we ever had at Olympus, and this is one that I certainly wouldn't say when I was working there. We at one point, you know, they had that live composite thing, so, you know, light painting kind of stuff. I had one of our retailers standing on the bar inside a pub doing the whole fire twirling with the steel wool in the whisk, but inside a pub. Like, and everyone was shooting them on the bar doing this. And I'm thinking afterwards, I'm going, we probably would have burnt that place to the ground. Like, wow, that was dumb, wasn't it? And I'm not sure that Dennis may have been involved in that. I can't remember.
Okay. That was all leading into this question that I want to ask. So you worked with Olympus, had a great time, obviously, but it came to a head at 2 a.m. one morning when you decided, that's it, I'm going out on my own. Tell me about what did your business look like before that? You said it was kind of side hustle sort of thing. You had a job, so you had a photography business on the side. What did it look like? And then what did those first, 6 months of you being full-time into your own business look like?
Yeah, at the time, I was doing a lot of training stuff for Olympus, and my side hustle, I guess, was doing like private workshops on the side. Just one-on-ones. I had some underwater photography courses that I ran with the dive clubs because I already had a good relationship there. I shot some weddings and things because of obviously everyone, when you know people who work in camera land and they're like, oh, you do photography, you could photograph my auntie's dogs or something like that. So I was doing those kind of like, I'll call them D-grade shoots, but it wasn't much. I think to me, it was more around the quitting part was knowing that I knew that there was potential there. I also know that, as I said from early on, I've got a family that's been very encouraging of all this. And I've lucky to have probably had the comfort in my mind of a safety net. If this all went tits up, it would be okay. Like I was never in a situation where I was going to be homeless or something like that. So I think that's really important to say because not everyone has the benefit of that. And I think that is a huge contributor to what I get to do because I don't have to be as worried about the consequence. Not to say that I'm not careful about it, and I have a lot of respect for that privilege, but it does give you a peace of mind knowing that, if you quit your job and this doesn't go well, there's a more of an attitude in our household of, well, great, but you tried and let's work out how to make it work, as opposed to, well, aren't you stupid and look what you did.
I told you so kind of thing,
100%. So that's a really, really important part. The first few months of it had a look, not great. It was at the time. Do you remember the show Shameless? It was on Netflix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had some friends that had moved from the UK and they were living with us, and it was during this period, which probably made it a bit easier because I had more like distractions. But one of them was watching the show Shameless, but I couldn't sit on the couch and watch it with them because I just saw my future. It was really, really weird. But yeah, I started running workshops. The thing is, it was a hustle, like a straight up hustle. It was, there was no marketing out there. Like Google Ads for me wasn't a thing really at the time. I built a website. I built some branding. I got a friend of mine to do some logos. My biggest thing was probably realizing you have to leverage relationships really quickly. And so I went and saw Peter Michael, who had run Michael's at the time, and said, you guys don't really have much of a training repertoire. You've kind of got, he had Olwen at the time doing some basic courses upstairs. But I said, I'm running these workshops. They're out in the field. We're going to do seascapes. We're going to do waterfalls. We're going to do all these fun things. And I'm just trying to channel all the Olympus stuff that I'd done. And I said, why don't I sell the workshops? Or sorry, why don't you sell my workshops alongside me? I'll give you guys a commission and I'll make the pickup and drop off point Michael's cameras, because then it's like product that you need to pick at the start of the day, product you want by the end of the day. We'll have this perfect synergy. And he was kind of open to it at the time. It never eventuated. But there was a good, strong relationship that sort of started to form because of that. And I think that support led me to I already knew the Michaels team because of Olympus, and they were supportive of the fact that I was going out on my own. So they would kind of recommend to people. And, I worked with Peninsula Camera Center for quite a while. Again, people who I had a lot of interaction with through my Olympus days, a lot of trust built there. So they started sort of selling my courses, and I started doing things back for them. And it was that relationship stuff that really kind of built it. But I remember I've still got people who come on my current workshops like regularly, who were on my very first workshop, which was called like Melbourne City Walk. And I think I charged like $50 for it. And I had like 3 people. And I thought that was totally amazing. So yeah. And these days it's no different. I still work really closely with brands. I make sure I touch base with people. I work, through BFOP as well, obviously, but it's those relationships, I think, that give you a bit of comfort, because, you've got a bigger team when you're just an individual doing this. There's lots of people rooting for you.
So Matt, I've got go on, Jay.
No, go on.
I've got a question for you. You're a multidisciplinary visual creative. You're
very
underwater.
Jack of all trades, but yeah.
I was trying to make it nice. Trying to use big words. You're a jack of all trades, and where do you rank, I guess, what you get out of the different genres that you shoot, whether it be underwater, wildlife, landscape, the commercial work that you do? Where do you rank those experiences in terms of what you love versus what you value in terms of, for the business sake?
Good question. I mean, I really love the wildlife stuff. Like the wildlife and underwater are my big passion projects. Underwater's harder because it's got less logistically, it's difficult. So it takes up a lot of time. So it's harder to commit to.
Yeah.
But wildlife's definitely where the passion is. Like I've come back from 2 weeks in Bright. The last 2 weeks I've had my 5-day workshops up there, and I come back and I've got all these photos because obviously we're shooting side by side a lot of the time to do demos and stuff. We had some really awesome conditions, and I look at them and they're great landscapes, great sunsets, great colors, great this, great that. My passion though is I've got a couple of shots I've taken with some of the gangs up there. Like that's a much more exciting situation because it's more unique. So I value that stuff very highly personally. I don't value it very highly from a business perspective. I think that there's, I don't know that there's much of a market for fun things. I'll put it that way. I think that that's the reality. I hear a lot of people wanting to become photographers, professional photographers. And I say, what do you want to do? And they go, I'm going to want to do waterfalls. And I'm like, well, how do you commercialize waterfalls? Like that is not physically possible. The only way you can commercialize a waterfall is by bringing people along to that experience, workshops, tours, trips, and encouraging them to get better out of their stuff. Because what you're essentially, doing is going on holidays and wanting to be paid for it, really, aren't you? Like, so how do you make that into an experience? And that's where the workshop part comes into it. You can add a lot of value being, it's very you add a lot of value to people, and that's where there's when it turns into business value. But if you just want to do stuff that's fun, like that's not going to happen. So even when people say they're going to do prints, it's like I know some very successful photographers who they don't struggle to sell prints, but that's a very hard full-time business to run. That's a very hard thing to crack where you make enough money to make it worthwhile. So
we've spoken in the past to Matt and Mika on our show, and we've also recently had Tom Putt on, both of which run a gallery. They're independent, like separate galleries. They both sell wall art, but they have spoken quite frankly about the reality of that, and just how rare it is for someone to actually get to that ultimate goal of opening a gallery and selling waterfalls.
And you know what though? Look at the people who have really made it in that space. And when I say really made it, I'm not talking about people who have got a gallery who are selling them. And I certainly don't think inside workings of anyone's business, but look at the big names out there. Look at Aquabumps as an example. Phenomenal photographer for a start, but it's not about the photography. That is entirely, I believe, a business-driven gallery. Not that I know them from a bar of soap, making a huge assumption here, but you open a gallery in an incredibly wealthy area that is incredibly iconically Australian. You go out every single day and show everyone how bloody amazing it is. And then you sell things that remind people of how amazing it is. That's a business decision. If you just go and took photographs around the world and said, look at all these amazing places around the world, no one's going to buy that because it has no connection to them. And so you look at the guys up in the Northern Territory who have made it. I don't actually know any of their names, but or in Western Australia, up in Broome, there's some really good galleries up there. What do they sell? Stuff that reminds people of that spot where it's a really emotionally connective area. Broome's a classic. That's the biggest stop on someone's round Australia trip. It's a life-changing moment for most people. So memories of those areas are going to sell. You take photographs. Look at Tom down at the Peninsula. People have their beach houses down there. They want to be reminded of that because when they work so hard to own a beach house in Portsea, they want to come home to their house in Toorak and see Portsea on the wall so that they remember where they've got to go on the weekend. There's destinations work like that. But I think if you just want to be a waterfall photographer or something, it's like how big is the market really for people who go, I want some random waterfall I've never heard of before on my wall. It's like, it's not real. And so, that's, I think, where there's a big separation between creative passion and business, because you've got to be sensible about what you think people want and where the market is. And just because 10 people tell you that you should do it because I would buy one, that doesn't make a business. That means you've probably found that 10 people who would buy one, and then when they're gone, who else?
Crickets
Well,
chirping.
can we do something fun then? Can we do a fun exercise? No, well, let's make waterfalls. No, let's just turn taps on around Bendigo and see if we can make a waterfall in Bendigo. So it's 2025. There are a lot of people that still would love to make a business out of their photography, whether it's part-time or full-time, in many disciplines. And you've just explained one, that it's almost impossible to make a business photographing waterfalls. But then you've simply laid out the formula for, I'm not saying it's easy, I said it's a simple formula for creating a successful gallery. Simple, not easy, not the same thing. Simple
also,
formula, which
you have a gallery, by the way, so I'm talking out of split depth here, but
Yeah. Just like, and hypothetically though, in 2025, let's play around with some various photography, whether it's styles or business models, and talk about how, if you were starting over in 2025, how you would go about trying to get that off the ground, like grassroots, just getting it going, not building the world's biggest business on day one, but like let's go with so let's start with something.
Without affecting anyone who's actually doing it at the moment. Yeah.
Because we're just talking about like, hey, we're just giving it a go. Like someone wants to give this a go. This is a way that you would give it a go in 2025. And let's start with something that you've got experience with, which I do want to talk to you about your business with it. But say for commercial photography, someone's a photographer. They've got some skills and they're like, I want to build a business being a commercial photographer. I've done a couple of jobs for a couple of mates who have got businesses and stuff. Now I don't know what to do.
Yep.
What would you do?
What's what commercial angle is it? Like, are we talking like product photography? Are we talking like interiors? Are we talking architecture? Are we talking?
That's the thing that they don't know.
Okay. So that's the thing. So you're probably saying the first thing would be to do is maybe focus in on an aspect of commercial photography rather than trying to be a generalist.
No, definitely not. I think a generalist is the way to do it, but I think it's more about what you've done. Like, if I was, look, put it this way, if I was starting that business today and I wanted to become a commercial photographer, the first thing I would do is I wouldn't do anything for free. That's probably the biggest like red flag in my world is, and I think this tied into something you sort of said last week where someone was maybe having a little tiny bit of a knife fight on YouTube in the comments about, we probably never touched cameras we're talking about. And I go, and the reason was that we hadn't created a review video on YouTube. Like, I don't have time in my life for a review video. Why? Because I'm busy actually working. I don't have time to do my Instagram account. My Instagram account's atrocious. My Facebook's even worse. My website's kind of somewhat up to scratch, but it's because I'm busy doing stuff. And I think that the moment you start going and doing things for free, I think firstly, it doesn't do the industry any favors. And if you're new to the industry, you might not realize that yet, but you will when you start actually becoming successful in the industry. It sets up a real tone of devaluing the product that's created, because it sounds as though like, well, you're not actually handing anything over. You're handing over digital stuff. And so therefore it's not tangible. Therefore, if you didn't get paid, it doesn't really matter because you didn't lose anything. I mean, it didn't cost you money to take the photo. And I don't think that's true. There's a lot of money involved in taking that photo. I would also say, though, that when you start doing this stuff, it's important to know your worth, but also be realistic and find clever ways to bring your price down without bringing your worth down. So as an example, approaching businesses that you have a vested interest in as an example. So let's say, for instance, I had one student a while ago, she was really interested in doing flower photography and wanted to do something a bit more commercial. And she was buying like $50 worth of flowers a week from the shop down the road to photograph them and doing interesting experiments with them. And then the shop started asking her for her photos, and she wasn't sure what to charge them because they said, how much would you charge to use them on our gift cards and stuff like that? And my answer to her was, don't bother charging, because the best you'll get is maybe like 50 or $100 a photo. And they're only going to probably buy like 5 or 10 off you at best, because that's all they need to fulfill their business purpose. Instead, why don't you say to them, ongoing, how about you give me that bouquet of flowers or offcuts or whatever it is that you're selling me every week? Why don't you give me something like that? And I'll give you some photos in return. And so it wasn't that you're doing it for free because you're both getting something, you're both having to give up something and you're both getting something out of it. You've created a relationship that's now going to be ongoing. And at some point in time, they're going to say, hey, we want you to do more because we really love your stuff. We've got to know you. We've got a relationship. And then that's when you can turn around and go, great, well, we can do more, but this is what it's going to cost. And you've already built that relationship, and people like working with people that they know, who are easy, who are uncomplicated, and who essentially have a really clear idea about what things cost and what they need. I think that when it's wishy-washy or when it's overstated, that's when you scare clients off. I see, I had someone recently, I won't name names, and also the person will know who they are if they listen to this. And credit to them because they've been really receptive to the feedback that I gave. But I looked at hiring someone to help me with some shoots. And I said to them, they're fresh out of uni, essentially. They did a photography diploma or advanced diploma or something like that. They're a great photographer. They're really good. They've got a good eye for things. They're a really nice person. And I said to them, what are your rates? And what they did was they jumped online and looked up the media rates for, Australia's award rate for media or whatever it is, and came back to me and said, this is my rates. And I said, yeah, but I can't really send you out on your own yet. I'm doing stuff. You'd be sort of assisting mostly. And I said, even if I sent you out on your own, your rates are now actually almost on par with mine. So if I'm sending you out on a job, there's nothing in it. They were asking for quite a lot of money, 1 year out of uni, and they're wanting to earn what it was like $1,000 a day kind of thing. And I'm going, you've not done the research as to how this fits into your life. You've just looked at a chart and said, well, that's what it should be. But that chart doesn't take into account your years of experience, all these things that people give away for free. So find ways to make yourself appealing for people to hire without just saying, I'll do it cheap or I'll do it free. Find a compromise so you can start a good relationship, a good conversation with people, build the relationship, and then they'll recommend you to friends. And the friends are not going to have any expectation they're going to get a favor. So it's the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 clients that are going to start paying top rate for it because they've had all these great recommendations. And yes, you might have done a bit of work for a bit cheaper than what you would have liked, but it still covered your costs and still, made sure that you had a value. And by the time you get those extra 2 or 3 client referrals deep, you're charging whatever you want because everyone relies on you and trusts you, and you've shown that you can actually deliver. That's kind of where I'd take it if I was doing it from today. If I was doing commercial, I'd say yes to everything as well. Don't be ashamed of the fact that someone asks you to take photographs of toilet brushes to put on some random discount site. That's okay. It might not be your passion. It's not waterfalls. It's still a job. It's still someone who's going to refer you. You look back and said that there is someone on the planet who works in a factory that makes nothing but calculator buttons, and that's their job. And they've got to be proud of that job, and they've got to embrace that. And I think as photographers, we've got to get our egos out of the way and be like, I shoot everything. I still shoot. Yesterday, I did a whole day of headshots. I shoot kindergarten marketing shots. I shoot, I shoot some cool stuff as well. But I do animation projects for clients for internal communications. Some of this stuff's so dry. It's nothing like me going to Africa or Tonga or all that stuff, but that's part of it. Life's not meant to all be the highs. And I think we've got to get our ego out of the way and realize that if you're doing this as a business, the business bit's got to come first, and you've got to put the other stuff aside a little bit sometimes.
Great advice.
That's amazing advice.
It's exactly what I wanted, and that was commercial. Now we've got the rest of the photography genres that we're going to go through. Chris, 3-day podcast.
It'll be amazing by the end of it, yeah.
No, I do. I want to ask you some more questions about commercial photography because I do a bit of it. I don't do a lot of it. Is your commercial photography under Matt Krumins Photography, under the same brand as your workshops and everything like that?
Currently, everything is under just my name, and I don't advertise it anywhere. I've started advertising my drone shoots, my drone stuff, but that's because it was meant to be the first page of like 6 pages, and then I just haven't done the other 5. I will put it up on the website. But yeah, it's all under one name. I don't know that that's a great idea. I think retrospectively, I probably would have chosen a business name that wasn't my own.
For the commercial specifically, or for the whole thing?
No, I think just for the whole thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with. I'll put it this way: one of the reasons why I've got a lot of my clients, because I don't have a lot of commercial clients. I've probably got like 10 or 15 clients that I work with. I don't do a lot of sort of one-offs for people. I've got good relationship, long-term clients, which is the way to do it because the admin goes right down and the trust goes right up and gives us a lot more flexibility to work with each other. But a lot of my inroads at the beginning were that I, being more of a photography instructor, those businesses approached me to come in and chat to their marketing teams to work out how we could insource some of their really basic event photography. So where, businesses have got these small events, they're not going to pay $1,000 for a photographer to come out and photograph it, because it's only going to be like 2 snaps that they need for their newsletter or something. And so I'd come in and teach them how to do it. I'd have 3 or 4 of them in a class. We'd do a whole day going through phones, videos, everything like that. And then inevitably they realize actually they've got these slightly bigger projects, and here's this person that's actually come in, and we've got the trust because I'm not trying to make them fail. I'm not trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Like, I've come in there and told them exactly how it is. This is exactly how you shoot it. Here, no secrets. And then when they've got an actual shoot, who's the person you want to bring in? The person that you trust to teach you, and the person who's had a trustworthy relationship, who's there to help and give you advice and tell you the times where you go, guys, you don't need me on this one. You can do this, or this person can do this, or this is not going to be of any value, and giving that really honest feedback. So, yeah, I kind of think that my teaching leads into a lot of my commercial work. And I think having it under one brand is actually quite a useful thing. It gives a lot more credibility. Where if it's just portfolios, I mean, you don't really stand out, do you? People don't hire portfolios, they hire people.
Yeah.
There was a good saying that I heard ages ago. I don't remember who the quote is attributed to, but it was, you only have to be good at 2 of 3 things. You've either got to be a pleasure to work with, always on time, or produce amazing work. You don't need to do all 3. You only ever need to do 2. You can be horrible to work with, but produce really good work always on time. People will tolerate you. You can produce pretty average work, but if you're really pleasurable to work with and you're always on time, people will tolerate that too. They'll work in those 3s. And I think it's a really good piece of advice for people, because you don't have to be perfect. And it gives you a little bit more flexibility to say yes to big things you might not be expert at. Just be really on time with it. Be a really nice person to deal with. And I promise you, people will overlook maybe the slightly subpar work. And then, of course, you'll get experience over time and you'll fill that extra gap. But you'll get the experience, or the opportunity, at least at the beginning.
I think it's really good advice, especially the, people think, oh, but my work should carry me, my output should carry me. But, I've been in a past life, I was a high-level people manager, and the amount of kids that I fired from mostly call center jobs, that they couldn't show up on time, and they couldn't be nice people to be around. And it resulted in them, having to explain to their next employer why they have a gap in their resume, and why they've suddenly lost their income. It's that whole, and I think I don't want to get on my rocking chair on the front porch and start ranting at the clouds, but I think they're really core skills for what we do, but for any industry. And I think work ethic is a really important and valuable asset that people can carry through life. And I, all too often, I've seen people that just don't understand what work ethic is, and how it can actually elevate what they do and how much they can produce. So it's really valuable feedback.
I think the classic in this is, like, a lot of my clients, we have such a good relationship that we, a lot of the briefs that I get are via text message now. A lot of the feedback sessions that we do with imagery or with video and stuff, like, we text each other. It's not done through necessarily through the formal channels. And it shows you the relationship part, where you make it easy, rather than being like, no, you have to come onto my website where you review your images and select the ones you like, and I'll touch those ones up. And you're making more work for your client. Your client doesn't want more work. That's why they hired you. So if it takes you an extra hour, you don't have to bill that hour. You could just appreciate the fact that you're earning really good money for the other hours you've already billed, and that this is a tiny bit above and beyond, which will mean you'll guarantee yourself the next job. And I think that's where that accountability of how do you treat your clients? How do you treat yourself in your own business when you're starting up? Don't be the person who tries to document every bloody line item. Be the person who makes someone's life simple, because you'll be loved forever. I've working with some of my clients now for like the last 15 years, even pre Olympus. I worked with some of these guys doing some side projects. And the thing that I love about it is we have such a good relationship and trust now that when I tell them it's going to be a really expensive job, they don't turn around and go, oh, really? We're getting another quote. They turn around and go, yeah, you're probably right. And it's not because it's, I'm not deliberately, taking advantage of that. It's just that if it's a big job and it's a big project, they've now got trust that when it's a small thing, we just get it done. Often I'll give advice and I'll give long phone calls and, read through things for them for free. just because it helps to nurture those relationships. A lot of, I think, newer businesses, I won't pinpoint younger people because I don't think it's specifically younger people, but I think a lot of new businesses, they want to account for every minute of the time like their lawyers charging in 5-minute blocks. And it's like, that's not our industry. Our industry is about collaboration and making life easier, you know?
Yeah. Yep. That's great feedback.
Can we talk, and we don't have to talk about your specific business details because that's not really what I'm trying to ask about, but I want to talk about pricing for commercial photography in 2025.
Just before you do that, I'm just going to take a quick break before I make my own waterfall.
Okay. If you got an ND filter, Greg, take an ND in there with you and see if you can get a nice stream, smooth.
Do it in monochrome though, you know, keep it abstract.
yeah. He might be able to start a gallery. I want to find out because there was always the traditional commercial photography rates model that I never really understood that well, which was very much around like different levels of licensing for print versus a billboard versus a this versus a that and all that kind of stuff. And that was when I was coming up in photography, there was a lot of talk about that, like, oh, people don't know how to price their work because, you know, someone should pay you a lot more if they're going to print it versus they're going to use it on a digital flyer or whatever. I never really got into it because the clients I work with, I just kept it pretty simple. But I don't know where I work in a sort of a little siloed area. And I don't know what the rest of the industry is doing these days. Do you know what's happening? Neither do you. Okay. What's your philosophy on pricing?
My philosophy on pricing is really, 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 really overly simple. And just to put a comment on that last bit, this is important to note, is that there are some commercial photographers who need that complexity in their licensing because of the way that they shoot. So I definitely don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that it's a model that gets applied to the wrong businesses sometimes. So you go, if you're a commercial photographer doing like high-end brand work, you know, talking like really, really, really well-known brands, and you're doing their above-the-line hero marketing campaigns, I can definitely appreciate that you're going to spend days and days and days just to get a shot that's going to be the cover shot of that thing. And therefore, to price that accordingly is very difficult. And you may not have, on top of that, regular work, as in like every day you're booked, because these are very big hero projects. Therefore, you're going to rely on things like licensing. So I'm not dismissing the licensing thing. What I will say is that most of us, like 99.9% of us, are not in that category. We shoot for small businesses or smaller businesses. They're usually not things that require licensing in my eyes. I think it adds a level of complexity that you also can't police. So as an example, I've seen brands before. And in fact, I've had one bad experience where the model that I was shooting with had some licensing things around their modeling, which is fair enough. And I can appreciate that a bit more because that's kind of their face being used in one brand, and they might not be able to then work with a different brand because of that. But essentially, this brand had agreed that it was for an online catalog. And in the end, they ended up using those images printed on all these pop-up banners at trade shows, and like it was everywhere. And I had a bit of a go at them and said, like, guys, you've agreed with the model that this is for one campaign. Now you've made them your hero pinup person. And like, that's not okay. I said, from a photographer's perspective, I'm not as fussed, but I've now got a model who will never work with me again because they feel betrayed, when it wasn't my call to do that. Yeah. So that's probably my only experience in the licensing space. But what I look at, my business model or pricing model is actually really, really, really simple. As advice, and I think it will naturally find its own groove beyond this. When you're starting out, I encourage people to think about, what do they want to earn a year? Like, what do you want to earn a year? If you're happy to earn $100,000 a year, great, that's your number. If you're happy to earn $200,000 a year, that's your number. Whatever that number is, you need to have a number, you know, because you're going to be coming from some sort of employment elsewhere. You need to go, well, what do you need in your life to live with? Knowing that, of course, things will grow, but that's your baseline. Then you got to work out roughly how many days a year could you feasibly work, because it's not 365. I've learned.
And I'm sure you've tested that based on what I've seen.
So what we end up doing is you then divide it by, you know, the number that you had. Of course, add things like GST, superannuation, all that other junk that goes on that maybe people don't really see. Keeping in mind also you have to pay tax. I know there's been a lot in the media recently about, sole traders surprised they had to pay tax at the end of the year. Like that's a thing. It's pretty easy.
It's that influencer market. Jesus,
Like,
pretty easy to work out what your tax rate is. Like these are really simple calculations, and that will actually give you an end of year financial number. That should be your goal number. Then you go and divide that by the 52 weeks in the year, or 48 if you want to take some holidays. And then you work out per day, and then you work out roughly on a daily basis how many hours can you actually be working, or how you're going to structure it. I like to structure things as either they're half days or full days, because charging for an hour or two means it's rooted up the rest of my day. I can't charge 6 clients 1 hour a day. That's not really going to work. So it's either half day or full day, and that will give you your rate. Screw what the industry is doing. I don't care what the industry is doing, because some people in the industry are wildly experienced and have way more skill and talent than me, and I can't measure my skills against them. Some people are total hack jobs, and I'm not going to measure myself against them. You don't know what they offer from a relationship perspective, a helpfulness perspective, an end product perspective, or maybe that end product is probably the only thing you maybe can measure. And even then it's very, very kind of, smoke and mirrors. Work that out, and suddenly you've got yourself a full-time wage. Yeah. Now that's your goal. That's what you got to start chasing, rather than looking at it the other way around and going, oh, wow, if I charge this much and I do this many projects, this is what I'll earn. Think about it the other way around. Like, this is a real job. It should have a wage. That's what the wage is. This is how much you got to make. And now you've got a goal to chase, and that's where the hustle starts,
So, okay. So how does that fit into, how does editing and stuff, post-production, fit into your rate? So basically, let's say Lucky Strap says, hey, Matt, need you for a half-day shoot.
Factored in.
So you build your everything into that half day. You would give me a price. You'd be like, hey, that half day is going to cost you $86,000. I'd be like, geez, Matt, sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
And then me as the client, I would
hang on. You were only going to charge me like $20 an hour to photograph the products.
Well, it didn't include post, obviously. That's where the post-production comes in.
He's got me.
Later. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's exactly right, though. This is the simplification, isn't it? Like, if you're a client, like, put yourself in my shoes. Oh, sorry, put yourself in the client's shoes for a second. Lucky Straps wants to get some promotional shots done. Now, the reality is you want to hire someone, let's call it for a full day of photography, because, you want to do lots of different shots of people climbing mountains and doing all sorts of stuff with your straps.
Yep.
The moment you have to ask the question, how many images will I get? That to me says you don't trust the photographer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it matter how many you get? Like, at the end of the day, you'll get what you get. You'd rather get quality rather than getting just everything, because I have to make up a number. I mean, if the lighting conditions are great, we'll probably get 1 billion shots. If the lighting conditions are average, we'll get enough to get us by and make sure that you feel like you've got value. But we're not going to go and shoot more stuff just to fill a quota. That's ridiculous.
But so this day rate, let's call the day rate for interest's sake, and hopefully it's probably somewhere in the ballpark of commercial photography on a small scale for small business these days. Let's say the day rate's $2,000.
Okay.
That gets you you edited images. Would it get, so let's say it was either going to be, we had tough lighting conditions and a lot of setup, so we got 10 finished images, or we had epic lighting conditions and everything was just kind of happening, a lot of shooting going on. There's 250 images. You would deliver either, like the editing, it's just you win some, you lose some. If you have to edit 250, you'll edit 250, and the client doesn't pay extra. You're just like, hey, that was the rate we agreed on, and I got all these great shots. Here they are.
Keep in mind that my editing for commercial, I don't do product photography where I have to touch everything up to a T. Like, I don't pull it into Photoshop and go through that whole rigmarole. I'm a Lightroom editor for most of my projects.
Me too.
So most of the stuff that I would find myself shooting personally, they are things that I could very easily go and, edit one photo up, copy, paste the edits across, and then go through each of them and probably spend 1 minute doing a quick masking job or a quick touch-up job. So it might take me 2 hours, 3 hours to edit it. But to be perfectly frank with you, you're earning $2,000 a day doing commercial photography, and you're probably only working for 8 hours that day. You're earning $220 an hour. I reckon you could sacrifice 2 hours to edit some photos. I think you'll be fine. Whereas I think that culture comes from a bit where I see people going, oh, but I've got to edit for 2 hours. And I'm like, step back and think about what you charged them 5 seconds ago, because the client that you're working for, they're not earning $2,000 a day. generally. You're talking to someone who's in marketing, who's got a really strict budget. They're probably earning $100,000 a year, and they're seeing you walk around. In their mind, they're like, you must be on $700,000 a year rate charging.
Yeah, they do the maths. They're like, hang on, 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year. Holy.
Yeah, you're trying to charge them for a couple of emails and some extra editing. Like, that's so illogical. I mean, what's one way to make someone feel like shit is to put that in their face. So I think that the case here is that you're buying an end product. There's no hidden fees and charges. You do this, trust me, I'll get your job done. And if I give you 10 images, it's not because I'm lazy. It's because that was the best we could do with that day. And the days that you hire me and we get 250 images, just count your stars that you got an amazing bargain that day. And you know what? That relationship will be nurtured and go on forever.
Yeah. I completely agree. That being said, just briefly, I am a Lightroom editor. I'm very similar to you, but there have been times where extra attention has had to be paid for an image. With that, what I would normally do with a client is say I'd send them the 250 and say, hey, here's all the images. I think they turned out great. If you plan on using any of these for the side of a bus, let me know and I'll give them a quick once over just in case. Does that make me look bad as a photographer that they all aren't ready for the side of a bus? Or is that a legitimate way to kind of be like, hey, like I can't spend an hour on each photo because there's 250 of them, but I just want to double check if you plan on blowing this up enormous for some sort of thing. How would you approach that? Or do you ever approach that with clients?
No, that's sort of, once those images are handed over, I hand them over at the highest res that I can. Are there things I might do to a particular image if it's going to be a hero image? Maybe, but also it's not my brand going on the side of that bus. If they've chosen to do that, they'll probably put it through their own graphics team. That would be my approach, to be honest.
Yeah. So you never have that conversation with them or whatever. You just deliver it, and in your mind, if that gets used for something massive, well, you're happy with that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given them that image.
Exactly. And the other thing is that they're not going to choose a crap image. And if they choose a crap image, well, that's obviously
sometimes they do.
That doesn't reflect on you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't want to be blasé about it, but that doesn't affect you at all. You are a photographer. You shot this stuff. As long as you're proud of what you've delivered. I mean, I wouldn't deliver an image that I don't like or I think's rubbish. They might choose the wrong image for the wrong campaign, but you're not their marketing team. You're the photographer who shot for their marketing team. So knowing your place in this industry is pretty important as well. Just because you don't believe in what they're doing or how they're doing it, that doesn't mean that you know more. That's up to them how they want to position themselves.
They've paid for that right, haven't they? They've paid for the right to do what they want with the image within reason.
And that's why I don't believe in the licensing thing, really, in my level of photography, because they've bought my time at a good rate. And I've delivered them a product at a good rate. We have an agreement. That was the agreement. If they want to, that image is now theirs. I don't think it's not something I have the right to go and on-sell to a different client now. I mean, they didn't commission it. So I don't see the point in holding, I hate that whole discussion around who owns the image. It doesn't bloody matter who owns it, really. At the end of the day, you shot it for someone in good faith. You gave it to them. If they use it for what they use it for, that's how they used it. Unless they put up on a billboard saying Matt's a shit photographer, see this image. That's an exception. But outside of that,
but then it's your lawyer's problem.
Yeah.
But it's never going to be your lawyer's problem. It's going to be a problem that you're going to sit there and beat yourself up over, probably completely ruin a relationship, and no one's going to win. I just say expect that that's how people operate in this world, and that's you might not like it, but if you go into it with that expectation, you're not going to get upset about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question follow up on that. But first, Nick Fletcher says they always choose a crap image. It drives me nuts. Yes, that's the thing.
Nick, that's in your portfolio, Nick, I hate to say it, but that's because we hired you as a photographer.
Hang on.
Oh dear.
Where's the? I've lost my applause sound. Oh well, sorry. That was good. It was a scream. All right. So tell me this, because this one gets brought up a lot on the internet, and I would love to know your opinion on it. You've delivered the client the images, and they reach out and they say, "Can we have the raw files from that shoot, Matt?"
I'd probably say no. I don't hand over my whole bank of raw files. But if they said there's a particular file that we want as a raw file, my first question is what for?
Yep.
And then usually it's a really legitimate answer they come back with. I've had that happen to me a couple of times. I did some work with a four-wheel drive company, and they wanted the raw files, and they said, because we edit all of our files in a particular style so that when we use them commercially, they all match. And I was like, that's totally legit. Yep. The fact that they edit their files all the time means that they know what to expect from a raw file. They're not going to look at it and go, oh, that's a bit weird. They're going to look at it and go, yeah, cool, that's a balanced shot that I need to go and touch up. So do I care? No. But if I had someone doing, let's say, personal photos, not that I do any personal photography, or a small business who I knew didn't have a history in that, my answer would probably be, what changes do you need made? Let me work on them for you. And I'd do it. And I probably wouldn't charge them for it. I'd just try and maintain that relationship, because there's probably something going on in their mind that they're thinking that they can't communicate. So let's have the conversation, work out what they need. And next time I'll be a better photographer for it, because I'll be able to deliver what they're after. And we won't have to have that conversation. Again, sacrifice a couple of hours and everyone's peachy, and we've probably got the next job as well.
I love it. Do they, if it was someone who just said, hey, we just want to edit in a similar style to all of our other images, blah, 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 would you charge them for it? Or would you just be like, hey, no, here's the file. Can't wait to work with you on the next shoot?
It takes me 4 seconds to load it into Dropbox. If I'm charging by the second, then I'm unemployed in this industry. No,
love it.
I just give it to them. Why not? Like, what skin off your nose is it? I mean, are you going to use that image for something else? No.
Some people have this really diehard thing where it's like, no, these are my digital negatives. No one can have them except for the photographer. And that's it. They're staunch on it. And it's like, David. Okay. David's saying that's like giving your film away. I don't see it that way, because it's a copy of a file. They're getting it. Yeah, they're getting a copy of it anyway. They're getting a finished copy. This is just a more data, essentially, an unfinished copy. I don't know. I don't see it as giving away some sort of intrinsic copyright. Like,
you know what this is? The difference here, Justin, is that this is where I was saying before. There's a wild difference between business and art, and business and passion. If a photographer asks, like, I'll put it this way: when Fuji, I shot the campaign for the GFX system, they asked for a copy. I guess it's a copy of a JPEG, because you can't send an actual JPEG, like in an envelope or something. I sent them the copy of the JPEG they asked for, and they never asked me for the raw files. If they asked me for the raw files, my first question would be, okay, but what for? Because they're presenting me as a photographer. And that is a reflection on me as a photographer, what they present. Because people will look back at those images and be like, that's Matt's work. Why are they all edited like this? Because that's not him. That's a different situation. That's where the art comes into it. That's one of the very few projects that I've worked on, a paid project, where I go, that is an artistic project. Most of the stuff that I shoot for clients, I have no interest in that actual photograph. Like, I'm invested in them as a client, but I'm not sitting there going, oh my God, that was such an amazing shot of this, headshot of this rando from marketing, like, that's not. So what do I care? Like, I'm like, hand over the film. Amazing. Now I don't have to store the film. Like, I've got no intimate connection with this stuff. So why on earth do I care about it? And I think that, it's certainly not universally true, but where most photographers I see fail at being professionals is that they get so caught up that everything they do with their camera is art, and it's not. What you're doing is producing a piece of digital content for someone who just, that's what they need. That's what they paid for. Give them what they paid for. If they take the digital files, if you want to be really nitpicky and be a bit of an ass about it, be like, great, I'll give you the raw files, but I'm deleting them on my end. You now own the raw files and I don't own them anymore. So if you come back to me in 2 years and you want the raw files, I'll be like, I gave them to you, But what's the value? Like, we're just getting nitpicky about it, having arguments with people. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, would you work with that person again? I shouldn't. Like,
yeah. Like you say, everyone's just trying to get their job done, and you're trying to make their life easier. So
keep in mind, I just said to David there, he said, sorry, I know you're right, but that's your income. I agree, but you've already been paid for it. That's the thing. You got paid to take the photos. The income is not loading a raw file onto Dropbox. Like, that's not your income. If that's what your job is, you're an admin assistant, you're not a photographer.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there, I can see how there's times where it's different levels, different things or whatever. But yeah, I agree. It's like, okay. This is great. The chat's going nuts. This is obviously a good topic. So David says, following up, he says, back in the day, wedding photographers made income on prints sold to a lot of the wedding party. Completely, it was a different time. It was a completely different business model.
different genre. I would never hand my wedding photos over to a client because they're not editors. They're not professional. That's not a business. That's a personal thing. That's not commercial photography.
Yeah.
I think there's a very big difference there because you will see people butcher your shots and then be like, yeah, Matt shot this. And they've totally rooted it up. Like, that's not okay. I completely agree on that. Personal photography, very different situation. We're talking commercial business stuff. Yeah.
But like always, I have handed over raws for a wedding before. We would always go through the process like you said.
In a court of law.
What's that?
Was it in a court of law?
No, it was not in a court of law. No, but it's like you would obviously always ask why. Like, what do you want? Is it, do you want one image? You want all the images? Blah, blah, blah. There was one person who was a bit of a passionate photographer, and they literally just said, I want to have them. I want to store them. I just want to store the raws myself for
just in case.
In case I'm 70 and I want it. And I was like, sure, whatever. Like, I don't care. They weren't planning on re-edit because I said, is there an issue with the edit or whatever? No, it was literally just. They were sort of, in their mind, they were treating them like negatives, and they were like, I just want to safely store essentially the negatives from my wedding. And I was like, sure, I don't care.
And that's personal choice, isn't it?
Because the thing is, at that point, our business was strong enough that even if they put those images out, which I'm sure they weren't going to, but say they poorly edited and put them out and said, oh, these are all shot by It was like, well, look at all of my work. None of it looks like that. So it wouldn't matter. Like, it's not going to ding my reputation.
No.
Because at that point I had a reputation.
And arguably, people are going to, they go on to, they've got their JPEGs off you and they load them on Instagram. Like, a lot of photographers actually have it in their contracts now that you're not allowed to put filters over your images if you post them on social media. And that, I actually agree. It sounds really harsh. And if you're not a photographer, you probably go, what the hell? But I actually agree with that, because what you're doing is you're re-editing those images, and that photographer is relying entirely on their brand, because you'll tag them. They'll be tagged. Like, there's a reputational part of that. But I think that when it comes to again, it's the corporate or the business side of things. Like, people, I've never seen a business put the photographer's name in the corner of the image, and credit them, because that's not what it's about. It's So I know that's probably a very blurry line, but each their own on it though. Like, you'll find people on both camps very, very passionate. I just think that you make your life difficult, and I think you're going to find you'll lose clients. If they're business clients, you'll lose clients when you start saying no to reasonable requests.
And I think that's the thing that I'm trying to get at from this discussion. I think we did get is don't be a diehard about it. As Dennis has said here, diehards die. Take any request, consider it, and don't just be like, oh, the internet says I should charge 20 grand for the raw file, so I'm going to hit them with that. Just really think about what's going on and what the purpose is, and have a conversation with the person, and don't just be like, I never give the raws out or whatever. It's
not the hill of righteousness you want to die on with a client, obviously.
No. Few good comments. Just circling back to clients picking images. Matt Palmer says, as a designer before being a photographer, the client would always choose the worst thing you show them. So you have to be careful about showing them anything you don't like.
That I agree with. And that's what I was saying. Like, if they're going to put on a bus and you're worried about which one they'll put on a bus, that's where you've got to assess your own work first and be like, shit, I better not deliver that in case it goes on a bus. I don't think you should moderate what they do, but you definitely want to be careful about what you give them.
Yeah. Nev Clark, fellow GFX shooter from WA and fellow podcast guester, says if they want to have the raw files from a GFX camera, they will soon discover how much work goes into editing, and they probably won't even be able to upload them into their computer.
Yeah.
That's a fair call. I had to upgrade my computer just to test the GFX 100S Mark II. Like, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Cam Blake photography. Hey Cam, says I'm just here for the good looks. # Matt's a hottie.
I think what Cam means to say here for his own good looks as he gets published all over YouTube, being the new pinup girl for the North Face.
I saw that. What's the deal with that? Is he an influencer now?
I don't know. Well, he certainly made me go. I've sold all my camping gear and bought North Face. So yeah, definitely.
Oh dear. John Pickett says sports photography is the same. I have no attachment to the photos I shoot. They just sit on my hard drives otherwise.
Exactly. So therefore, they got no value on your drive. They got no value when they come to sell. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, what else we got? There's so much going on. We can't keep up with all this stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Cam Blake says, easy solve, just shoot JPEG only. Yeah, problem solved. There are no RAWs. When the client asks for RAWs, you say, what? What's a RAW? I don't know what you're talking about. I just shoot JPEG. And Cam Blake says, I'm rolling in cash now. Being an influencer is the life.
I've got to say, that Cam Blake, that happened well before you're an influencer. I've seen you buy Leicas. I've seen you buy GFX. I've seen you buy them all, mate. There's something going on there. It's you must be selling your raw files to your clients after you shoot them, I reckon.
For a premium. Yeah.
Oh dear.
I just want to take a quick break. Just to not another break. No, the waterfall's done. The waterfall's fine. But just wanted to remind everyone that you are watching and listening to the Camera Life podcast, proudly brought to you by Lucky Camera Straps. Lucky Straps, makers of fine premium leather camera straps from Bendigo, Victoria. They're all 100% handmade, and they come from our hands to yours. So if you're looking for a new strap, hit up luckystraps.com. We sell straps. We sell gloves. Here in the Southern Hemisphere, we're heading into winter eventually.
Focus. There it
your
is.
Canon's having trouble.
Look at that. Yeah, nice.
Oh, smooth. Straps, belts, T-shirts and hoodies. Get in now.
Oh, yeah. Winter's coming. Grab a hoodie.
Yeah, I've got my hoodie on.
Nice, relaxed fit hoodie. We'll send you one, man. You want a hoodie?
Yeah, we'll get you a hoodie. You should wear it at BFOP and
Always up for a hoodie.
promote the brand for free.
Dennis says this is the second best episode ever. Right behind yours, Dennis?
I think he's referring to my first episode with you guys.
Yeah.
Now, so we've only, Greg, we've got maybe half an hour. Matt's probably got to go soon. You got a hard out time, Matt? That you need to be.
Not a hard out time, but I have to go and pick up a DJI Mavic 4 Pro.
Let's talk about that.
There's that. I've got a toy shop going on this month, so yeah.
Been seeing lots of interesting socials about it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about that. Because I was like, what are we going to talk about? We still got to talk about your GFX stuff. But before we do that, let's talk about drones. Because, okay, so first of all, you do commercial work with your drone, yes?
I do, yes. That's a new thing. I got my qualification in October last year. And so I'm slowly breaking into that as a space to, again, complement the whole, I'll take photos of toilet brushes if I have to.
Very briefly.
With a drone?
Yeah.
It's got a pretty good zoom on it.
So earlier in the chat, I won't go all the way back, but Dennis actually said just take really artistic shots of the toilet roll brush. Dennis, that's my challenge to you. I would like you to light paint artistically a toilet roll brush and then come on the show and talk us through the process.
Yeah.
You've got until Monday night.
Yeah.
All right. So you're trying to build drone work into it, into your commercial work. Tell us a little bit about that and tell us what are you using now and what do you like about the Mavic 4?
So currently I've got a Mavic 3, but for any projects I've had in the commercial space, I've actually hit up my friend Tom Putt and borrowed his Mavic 3 Pro because it is a much better drone. And but upgrading, obviously, the technology's come a very long way. Mine is very much due for an upgrade from an image quality perspective. I think it's important if you're going to deliver to clients, and especially when you start shooting with good cameras on the ground, they're going to directly compare the quality of that to what they're getting from the sky. And whilst they're not going to match, you need to shrink that gap as much as possible. It's a sensible upgrade, I think, to be honest. I think there's some stupid things in it, but on the whole, just the image quality upgrades are worth it.
What are the stupid things? Oh, sorry, Greg.
I just don't think you need, I think that I've sort of said this about a lot of different cameras that are coming out recently, but there's a lot of that shift towards the whole influencer thing. No offense, Cam, where, they've got like a spinning gimbal that can do 360-degree spins. And you go, what's the value of that? Well, you think, well, great, you can shoot vertical content. Great. The only thing that's got is for social media. You can crop that in any way. The other consideration is when you do go vertical, you can't tilt it down more than like 20 degrees. And so you can't actually get a lot of flexibility in those vertical shots. I saw a guy using it for stitching, which looked pretty cool. But on the whole, I'm not really convinced that that's a tool that's a professional tool. I think it seems kind of cool, but ultimately it will never get used by professionals. And I'm sure it probably cost a lot of money to put into the drone and probably slowed the production down a lot.
But their teaser videos where the horizon spinning is worth every bit of research and development that went into that spinning drone, because it's like.
But here's the thing, like, show me what kind. And this is, you know, again, this will get me on a rant. But like any commercial project that I've ever done, nearly any commercial project I've ever done, I should say, doesn't it all represent what you see on a YouTube channel?
No.
Like businesses actually don't want that. Like I've tried before. I had a very, very serious client and they wanted to do something a bit more upbeat and a bit more, you know, like cool. And so I shot a piece that was shot in a really kind of like fast transitions, you know, like lots of movement, you know, fast pace. And what they came back to me and said was, oh, like that's great and all, but we need it to be accessible. So we need to slow it down by about 50%. We can't have this shot. We don't want these transitions. And by the time they actually stripped it back, it looked exactly like every other boring corporate video. Why? Because in a corporate space where they're actually paying good money for this stuff, they don't need flashy or want flashy. What they want is a video that's in, you know, it's good enough to watch and incentivizes people to watch it. But my God, if I showed someone a drone shot in a corporate business of the horizon line moving, they'd say, oh, I'm sorry, but HR says this makes some people feel seasick. So, you know what I mean, it's not
yeah.
It's a very novelty tool that you'll see a lot of travel bloggers using, but no one else.
It's interesting because the DJI Mavic 4, sorry, Justin, 4 Pro, they are selling a creator combo bundle.
Well, that's the word, isn't it? Yeah.
Everything's a creator combo.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Joe.
I was just going to say I did a commercial shoot on Tuesday, and drones. I never, like, unless they want it, I don't normally discuss it beforehand. But if it works on the day, I'll often say, "Hey, I've got the drone. Would you like me to put it up?" Because I never know.
Of course, your insurance company and your licensing with CASA would be like, you know, obviously approve of that in there. Shh, Justin, you don't say this on YouTube.
Absolutely. Hey, I've got all of the appropriate accreditations and whatnot. I actually do.
Good.
It's registered and stuff. Yeah. Although I don't have. I'm going to ask you about the course that you did. I don't know if I have that.
Don't. We'll go into a whole big wormhole. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll save that for another. Maybe we'll do a drone episode. Maybe we'll get a few dronies on.
Yeah,
we'll do a Monday night drone.
Yeah, you have a fight.
Anyway, so I did. I put the drone up, and what would you imagine that I got? It was basically a work site, big hole in the ground, replacing a giant bit of like a 1.2 meter diameter pipe for Barwon water or whatever, big crane on site. And basically you keep your distance and you slowly work your way around in a semicircle, very, very slowly, and film that. And then you work your way back, take a few photos. Then you move a little further away and you do the same thing again. And, you know, like it's not, there's nothing exciting. It's
also, to be honest, nothing you see on YouTube is technically, like, when I say legal, I don't want to be a wet blanket, but at the end of the day, if you're doing commercial work and you're doing stuff that's not actually within spec or scope, you're asking for a nightmare. Like, you want to lose everything you've got, go and have an insurance issue with an unregistered, uninsured drone flying through fog in the middle of a city over people, and you know, something happens. It's like there's a bit of risk mitigation there. So what you can actually legally do with a drone mostly doesn't involve these novelty features, you know, and clients don't want you to do illegal stuff because it's their ass as well.
Well, that's actually a really good point. A lot of the night features where they're like, hey, you can, you know, this beautiful shot of Hong Kong at night or whatever. It's like, how many people are actually allowed to do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially over people. Like, I mean, you can do your cam. You can do, so for instance, like I've got night approval. I've got my REOC, so you can do night. You still can't fly through fog. It's got to be within direct line of sight. And when you fly at night, technically, you need to have like light patterns put on the ground to light up your launch area. You need to have permits wherever you're flying it. You have to have a whole flight plan with it because, of course, at nighttime as well, you're not really able to get the same depth perceptions and stuff. There's a lot that goes with it. So I actually find, again, this kind of comes back to what we said before about, you know, doing jobs for free with drone stuff. If you're pulling a drone out and you're not charging good money for that drone and doing it by the book, you're doing yourself a disservice because there's a lot of money in drone work. But big companies will not hire, you know, the teenager who went down to JB Hi-Fi and bought one. They're going to hire the company that specializes in drones, who are going to go through all the paperwork and all the permits and all the bullshit. It's going to take you forever, but you get paid for it. You know, you just put it up for free, it won't insure you any more work. They'd rather you, I think most of my clients would rather me say, actually, sorry, we're not illegally allowed to do that. That's not possible here. We would need to do all these permits. And what they usually say is, oh, okay, great. Can we get those permits? And I say, yes, it's going to bump our project by a month. That's okay. They're actually fine with it, but they would rather you be that honest person rather than just, anyway, you get
Throw a drone
around.
up in the air every time.
Drone stuff is such a nightmare because most people just play ignorant. And the reality is it's actually regulated by a ridiculously strict regulator. And so the moment something goes wrong, it's all fun and games until someone gets hurt,
So
there's a
Matt,
reason why.
Ask me a dumb question. So I was just going to ask a dumb question because I've never looked into buying a drone. I've never considered the background of being licensed and all that sort of stuff. So you can just walk into JB Hi-Fi or Walmart if you're in the States, and you can pick up a drone, and there's no need for certification beforehand. You can just walk out the store with a box.
Yeah, so you don't need a license to play with a drone. There's still rules that govern what you can and can't do. And I think when you open the box, it's got like an Australian, like a CASA flyer, and you scan the code and it takes you to like the top 10 rules, which are, don't fly within 30 meters of people, buildings, roads, infrastructure, which limits your options. You can't fly in national parks. You can't fly. There's a lot of rules, right?
Yeah.
We're all bound to. The moment you do it commercially though, like anything, that's when all the goalposts change. So the moment you get paid a cent to do drone work or things that involve a drone that you're handing over for a client. So for instance, if you as Lucky Straps took some drone shots to promote Lucky Straps, you can do that without being licensed because you're not selling that service. But if you did a shoot for Unlucky Straps and you hand that content over, you would then need to be licensed and insured and not just registered, but realistically, you should have your REOC, which takes quite a long time to get. It's quite involved and it's not particularly cheap. Like I've just put in a new application to get, they call it a temporary maintenance order. And it's when they don't have a rule for it yet or a way to break the rule yet. So they put these temporary things in place and it's called flying over or near people. So it actually allows you under certain conditions to fly your drone over crowds, but you have to have either a parachute system for emergencies or have a micro drone that falls under a particular category and then a speed limit on that drone. And it's going to take 4 months to get approval and it's costing me about $2,000 just to get one line written into my operations manual to let me do it. So it's when you do it properly, it's a ridiculously difficult thing. And but I think in the future it's going to pay us back in a big way because they will come down very hard when people start doing dumb stuff. And when they do, it'll only be the people who did the right thing that are going to survive it from a business perspective. And businesses are going to become very aware that they can't just get Barry down the road to chuck a drone up.
Yep.
Especially not Barry. So just to clarify now, do not take this as fact. Because it's my interpretation of what I think is correct, and I could be 100% wrong, but you do need to be registered. You need your RPA, but if your drone is under a certain size, you can use it for business work legally. Insurance is a whole separate matter, so let's not talk about that. I would 100% be insured and have drone work listed in your insurance of what you do. Where the issue will be, where people probably don't realize, is there are a lot of restrictions on where you can fly that for your work. And people will often be like, oh, I'll just do some real estate photography and put it up around these streets and stuff. And that's where you're going to have issues when you're flying over people and roads and stuff like that. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and doing some work for a client,
you still need to have your RPL though. That's the thing. You still need to have.
Not under 2 kilos, not to do business work. You do not.
That's the difference though, is doing business work, right, for your own business or selling your services are two different things. That's where they clarify the difference in it. Yeah,
for business or as part of your job. For business or as part of your job.
Yeah, but it's part of your job. So
legal.
Well, look, this is my understanding anyway. Look, from when I did my course, where we defined the line, and it was for my job would be if you're a real estate agent, right, and you're doing for your job as a real estate agent, you can do it. But if you're selling your services to a real estate agent, that's no longer in that category.
I don't think so, because it's for business. I don't know. I'm going to get a
definitely worth having a look into. But look, at the end of the day, I'll be honest, everyone does it.
But you're right though. Is I think a lot of people don't realize how much they might be skirting the lines or potentially stepping right over the top of them, and it's very risky.
I think, and this is
I had a plumber out the other day because I've got a roof leak, and he sent up a drone rather than get out a ladder.
So that's part of your job. That would be considered part of your job, because you're not selling the product of I'm doing drone work for you. I'm doing it to help aid in my own job.
Yeah.
And that's where they define the line in my course. And it was interesting because I queried a few things about what I wanted to do, and they're very unhelpful, CASA.
the course operator was, or
no, CASA, because what you do is you
right.
inquire in saying, this is my interpretation of what you've got in your regulations.
Yeah.
Can you clarify if this situation is how I'm interpreting it correctly? And their email back is, see this line in the regulations, which is the same line that I sent them. And they basically they refuse to have an input. And so the premise that I've got from this is also the feedback I've got from the course that I did. They said, basically, you need to interpret lots of things. And it's CASA's way of saying, we're not going to put hard line rules on every situation, because you can't. Instead, we're going to give you a set of things that if we believe you did the wrong thing, we're going to pull you up on it. We're going to drag you before our committee, and you need to explain how you interpreted that rule and how you logically thought through it. So, for instance, if you flew it for real estate and you sold your services to real estate and you put it up there and you didn't have an exclusion zone, you didn't take it off from a place that was more than 30 meters from people, you flew it over a busy road, you did all these things, and you said, yeah, but I'm doing it for my job and I didn't think I needed this. They'd turn around and say, well, here's the other 6 regulations you broke to do it.
Yes,
exactly. The classic one at the moment I've heard a lot about is drones going missing in national parks. So one of the reasons I've heard that they don't let you fly in national parks, obviously that's a nuisance and it's wildlife and all that stuff. But one of them as well is that if your drone goes AWOL and it lands or falls out of the sky or hits a bird or something, you've got a lithium battery sitting in the middle of a dense forest that when it goes through summer, winter, and that battery decays, it can be the start of a bushfire. Now, you go and fly in a national park, what are the odds of that happening? Very, very low. But if it did, one of the questions going to be asked is, did you consider this? And what was your mitigation? And if you turn around and go, no, I didn't consider it, no mitigation, they're going to say, well, where's your JSA? And you go, what do you mean by JSA? And they're going to go, well, in your regs, it says that you've got to have a risk assessment of every flight. And so it's kind of that unraveling approach to it. I don't think it's about saying there's a strict, you can do this, can't do that. It's more about saying you can't, if you could, there's no ignorance in this. You can't sort of go, oh, I didn't really think of it like that. That's not good enough. They're going to say, no, here's all the rules. You should have applied every single step of this. So there's a lot of, I don't want to, I'm not the authority on it. That's for sure. I mean, I've done the courts and I've done my, my fair share of inquiring, and it's not been that helpful, the inquiring part. But I do think it's an area that it's a dangerous area.
I think it's all built so quickly, drone photography. I mean, I know it's been going for a long time, but and especially now that you can buy drones from pretty much any toy store, any, JB Hi-Fi, Walmart, all those sorts of things. It does make it very difficult for regulating bodies to manage it as well. I just want to jump to a comment from Cam, who raised a question. Are the punishments hard enough for those cowboys flying drones without the proper licenses? You rarely hear of someone who has done the wrong thing being caught and punished. What are your thoughts on that one, Matt?
To be honest, I probably don't have much of an opinion on it, because I think that exists in all facets of life, doesn't it? If you don't get caught, you don't get punished, right? I think that in most cases, the person you're getting caught by is probably your own conscience. You're also your risk for appetite, your appetite for risk. I mean, I'd say that for me, I know that I've probably done things in my droning that I'd look back at and go, that was probably really like skirting the line and I got away with it. I probably could have been more safe here. I could have not taken those shots there. Nothing serious, but I'd look at the national park thing as an example. I've got a really hard line on flying in those areas or doing anything that's got a real, the risk to it. So to me, the risk is not getting caught by CASA, because that's bad, of course. Excuse me. The risk to me is that something actually goes wrong.
Yeah.
So for instance, I look at, I had some students last week on my boot camp who brought drones with them, and they said, can we bring drones? And I said, well, you can bring them, but technically we can't really fly them anywhere up around Bright. There's airports all over the place. It's national park all over the place. I said, realistically, I'm going to say you probably can't fly them, but bring them. If there's somewhere that we could fly, we will. And we didn't. And the reality was, as soon as we got up there, I sort of had that moment of going, they're on my workshop. For me they're not qualified. They're also under my instruction at the moment. I'm not licensed to instruct them in that at the moment, in the way that I think I should. I haven't applied for permits to fly them anywhere, which means that suddenly I'm doing unpermitted activities on that land. Now, if something happened, they flew a drone into someone, they smashed into a house, they started a fire, anything, whatever. How would I say? What would I say in court? I'd be like, "Oh, I just thought it'd be fine." Like, that's not good enough, is it?
Yeah.
So to me, it's easy to go. We just don't do it. We really just avoid it at this point. And the cowboys who go out and do it and whatnot, don't have an opinion on it. By all means,
Well, that's where it
but
brings me back to.
Like,
Sorry, Matt. I was just going to say, it brings me back to my question earlier about how you can walk into a big box store and buy a big drone without ever having to really be accountable for it.
Well, you are accountable for it, I think, but you're not commercially accountable. Do you mean it's the same way that if you are walking down the street, you're like, there's a public liability that comes in when you're doing things for money. Like, that changes the goalpost with most aspects of life. So,
yeah, true.
You may think about cooking a meal for someone. If you cook a meal for someone and give it to them for free and they get food poisoning, well, that's your bad. The moment you've been given $1 for it and they get food poisoning, now you've lost your house. Like, it's
yeah.
So I think that's exactly why, at this point in time, until it gets better defined, I think I personally just think you got to stay away from it. Doing things like online YouTube videos and online courses on how to fly drones, that's awesome because it detaches you from people's dumb behavior. But yeah.
So my advice would be, if you have wandered into JB Hi-Fi and bought yourself a tiny little Mavic Mini or anything like that, go to the CASA website, go to the drone section, get your RPA operator accreditation. It's basically an online test that doesn't do anything really, but at the minimum, it'll give you the basic set of rules that you need to abide by, the do's and don'ts, and don't do the don'ts. And then it'll give you your aviation reference number. You can register your drone, and then at least if anything happens, you can say, well, I've done the bare minimum that's required by me to own this drone. Don't just buy the drone and fly it without doing that stuff, because you need to at least have made an effort to learn the rules. Like Matt said, ignorance isn't a excuse.
No, and I think that's the thing, is people don't realize how dangerous these things can be as well. Like, there's been so many cases where drones have fallen out of the sky around the world where it's a kilo of battery and plastic that falls from 150 meters and it hits someone in the head. Like, there was a little girl who died in the States, she was 12 years old, a drone swarm, the big new fireworks shows.
Light shows,
They lost 1,500 drones or something came down, or 400 drones or something came down out of the sky, and one hit this little girl in the head and killed her. And you sort of go, what are the odds? Like, very, very low, but these things happen, So,
and during the LA wildfires, we saw a drone took out it didn't take it out, but it damaged one of the firefighting planes, the scoopers, the water planes. So they damaged the wing and put it out of commission.
That person's now being sued, not just by the firefighting guys for damaging the plane. I think it was $180,000 of damage on the wing. But also now the people who lost their houses in that area are suing them because they decommissioned a firefighting plane that could have prevented the fire. Yeah. And it's just an example of these knock-on effects. It's extreme, but it's like, gosh, I don't want that in my life. That's too hard.
Yeah, you don't want to take the risk.
Anyway,
Levin from Review Photography, actual pilot, not fake pilot, says CASA work on the basis of, if we think you've broken our interpretation of the rules, we'll test it in court. And you don't want to be in that situation.
No, I think I agree entirely. And I think you'll probably lose because they wrote the rules. Yeah.
All right, let's jump to GFX.
Yeah, we're a long way into this show. Okay, Matt, you've shot every camera brand under the sun other than Ricoh and Pentax. Pentax, let's not forget them. What were you shooting with up until recently?
So I've still got Sony. I've been shooting Sony since 2020. I changed across from, I was Panasonic, then Olympus, then Canon, then Nikon, Sony, and then Nikon, Sony, and then Fuji. Recently I've purchased my GFX. It's not to replace my Sony gear. It's just a different purpose. So I'm going to have I'm going to have. Cam says I'm a bit of a camera whore. I think it's more that I'm only going to have one camera at a time, not all of them in my bag. But
technically, he said you're a bigger camera whore than he is.
That's true. But no, to me, it's a different camera. I shot that campaign with Fuji last year, and ever since I've been teetering with this idea of like, should I just get something for myself? Because what you find is whatever camera you use for work, you always treat it like work. It's kind of, there's like that Pavlov's dog response. When I pick up my Sony, I kind of go into like efficient work mode. And despite it being amazing image quality and no flaws there, I think it doesn't slow me down. It speeds me up. And I think I need to slow down in my life at the moment a little bit with my artistic stuff, not the business stuff. And so this purchase of the new GFX was really about going, I want a camera bag that when I go out shooting, that's the bag I pick up. And then when I've got commercial work, that's the bag that I pick up. Because I don't like to mix those two things up. Otherwise, I find that even my pleasurable, photography, that turns into work. And when you do such a fun, genre of work for work, it becomes a blurry line where you often feel like you just lose. Everything becomes work. Not everything becomes pleasure. It goes the other way. Everything becomes work. And so I've toyed with this. I looked at buying some new lenses, the new Sigma 300 to 600 f4 wildlife lens for my Sony. I put that on order actually. And then, I think it was like days before it landed in Australia. I was like, oh, no, that's not going to fit the bill. It's a big lens. It's an amazing lens, but I won't carry it around. I did shoot some great stuff with the Fuji gear. I have played with it like 100 times. I borrowed it. And despite what people might think of my relationship with Fuji from our last episode, I do love the GFX system. And so this was going to be is going to be my more artsy camera.
Nice. Good choice, I say.
Yeah. It's pretty, like, it actually performs better than what I remember in terms of like autofocus, animal tracking and stuff. Like, it's wildly better than what I remember. And yeah, it's something that ever since I've had it, it's only been a couple of weeks I've actually had it delivered. I've been borrowing one for a couple of weeks before that. But I do notice I slow down. It doesn't shoot 50 frames a second. It doesn't do all the fancy stuff that some of the new cameras do. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's actually quite a good mindful way to shoot.
Okay. So it's mainly for your personal work, which is obviously heavily wildlife focused. Or is it? Is that, are you seeing that in the future that there is, or is there going to be less of that? Is that, because I'm sort of wondering, like, GFX isn't really specialized in like big long lenses. They
got a 500.
Well, okay, they got a 500. That's true. And it is pretty. It's pretty nice and compact, actually. Okay, well, so maybe I'm wrong. Talk me through it. Like, tell me.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have bought it if it didn't have that lens. Like, it's the equivalent of a 400 millimeter equivalent, roughly, f5.6. But then the depth of field gives you roughly an f4. So it's a 400 f4. You can put a teleconverter in it, 1.4. But also remember, you're 100 megapixels, so there's a lot of cropping ability in there. I think with my work in general, I don't shoot stuff that's really far away. So I'm not the sort of photographer who likes birds, or those kind of like really small subjects that are way off in the distance that I need to get a shot of. Like, if we had a leopard sitting 200 meters away, I would probably not even bother taking a photo of it, because I know that through the heat haze and everything, it won't be clear, it won't be sharp.
Yeah.
I'm not close enough to get the depth of field. I'll wait until I've got a leopard that's closer,
Okay.
So I'm a bit more fussy about my photography these days. And so I think this suits me down to the ground, because I'm not really as much of an opportunistic photographer as what I used to be. I used to kind of want to shoot everything I saw. And coming back from my Africa trips now, I'm actually taking this approach where I'm booking these workshops in South Africa. They're all identical. We do the same trip each time. It's a really accessible, easy part, more commercial part of Kruger. It's not as exciting as going to Chobe in Botswana and stuff like that. But what I love about it is that for me, it's been that desensitizing, that normalizing of it. So I get to spend my time, concentrating on my students that are with me rather than my own photos. Yeah. And when something really interesting happens with all the right conditions, I've got a camera that I'll be happy capturing it with, but I'm not sitting there desperately needing to get a photograph of that secretary bird in a tree, 200 meters away, or, those cheetahs that are on the ridgeline way over there. And so I'm a bit more comfortable going to places like that now and sort of watching things unfold. And if the shot comes up, great, and I'm really, really happy with it. But if it doesn't, it's actually nothing, doesn't matter for me. I don't need to have a subpar or sub-quality shot because I've done it before. So I think this camera is giving me a bit of that freedom to step back and think, I don't need to shoot everything. I can shoot the stuff that's going to be really great. And that way, when I look at my portfolio, hopefully it'll be a little bit more, I guess, cohesive as a piece of work where I go, yeah, this is me, as opposed to like, these are all the moments I've seen, if that makes sense.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's also pretty bloody amazing. Like, really, the camera's kind of stupid. Like the dynamic range in it, even you know what is the biggest difference? It's something I find really hard to describe, and one that's way too technical for me, but it's got 16-bit color, and which means not very much to me at all until I started researching it. And what I've noticed, like in the physical version of that, is when you pull up shadows from really, really dark shadows, they actually have color in them. They're not just kind of gray washy. They've actually got full color through all the shadows, all the highlights. Like the actual range in the camera is the same as a lot of others, but when you recover the range in a lot of cameras, you get very gray, kind of grainy meh. Whereas this actually recovers the data, and you're like, wow, that's actual real data. Like that's really usable. And so
it's
like,
all there.
Very important.
It's all there.
Stop it, Matt. You're making me want one.
You screwed up the shot. It's all there. The data's there. You just got to pull it out. Yeah, it's amazing.
So I think that to me is a huge one. Now I've got a big art project that I'm going to start working on, and when my brain slows down a little bit, and that's something I'm really excited about, and it's very much in line with GFX. Yeah.
Dennis Smith says, I have some insane examples of dynamic range. GFX review incoming.
Forward to that.
We will.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, give us a quick whip through of your GFX kit, like start to finish. What is it?
So I've got the GFX 102, not the S2, and only because I thought I might use it for video at some point. So you might as well have one that has video. And I also like the viewfinder better.
The S2 does have video, just for people listening.
It does.
It's
have video.
not fully
it's
featured.
Not the same.
Yeah, not as featured in the video space. Also like the idea of the compact flash card. I think the S2 is just SD card. I think. Anyway, is it one of each? There you go. So anyway, I got the 102, and then I'm still waiting on some of the kit to come through. I've got the 20 to 35, which is my kind of only real zoom lens. That's going to be that's the wide angle landscapey stuff. And I did some astro with the other day, which was bonkers. That's an f4. I got the 55mm 1.7, which is the equivalent of 46 millimeters. So
have you shot with that much?
Yeah, I like that lens.
Is it crazy? Like the depth of field? Is it just like?
The depth of field is like, it's not really that much different from what you get on full frame, because most full frame primes are like 1.4s and 1.2s.
True.
So
true.
Depth of field's the same. It's a different look in the depth of field, I think, but it's similar kind of blurriness. It's the sharpness comparison. So the sharp versus the blurry, it's that just, the gap between how sharp your in focus is compared to how ridiculously blurry the back is. Also, you can shoot further back and get shallow depth of field. So it kind of gives you different working distances. I got the 110mm f2. I'm waiting on the 250mm f4. I got the 500 5.6 and a teleconverter, which I'm waiting for still, and a few batteries. So
okay, so just one zoom and at the wide end, and everything else primes.
Yeah, to be honest, most of my Sony kit when I shoot these days for my own personal stuff, I use mostly primes just because I do inherently they're a bit faster. I also kind of like the fact that you don't have the zoom. It makes me less lazy. Yeah, I
love it.
So I've got a kind of lens to cover all seasons though. Like it's not as though I've got two primes and I'm stuck to. Like I've got something in each space. That I can work with. Yeah.
Talk to me about the weight of the system. I know you're only new to it, but is it noticeable compared to your Sony system? And are you sort of like, you're prepared for that?
The weight?
The weight of the overall, like the lenses are a little bit heavier, the body's a little bit heavier. Is it noticeable or not really?
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
Because you carried it around all day Saturday.
Yeah.
On a sling.
Yeah.
Not a lucky strap, mind you, but a sling.
Certainly wouldn't. It's massive. Yeah. But that's it, like, it's massive. But I look at this, the equivalent of a 400mm f4 is way smaller than my 200 to 600 Sony.
And lighter. It isn't terribly heavy.
Yeah, it's not heavy at all. So like
yeah.
there's that aspect of it. But I guess the thing is, you don't buy this camera with the idea of being like, I want something small and light so I can carry it with me. This is a camera where you go, I have a bag with this stuff in it, and when I take it out, I'm there for one reason. This is not like a travel camera.
Even
so
though
what you're saying is, if you want something small and light, get a GFX 100 RF.
He is not. He is not.
No, but I don't think it's not designed for that, and I think we're kidding ourselves if we think we can put it in that basket. I even saw a review before I bought it. I looked up a lot of reviews of Sony A1 versus GFX, just to be like, I've shot them both, but is this my confirmation bias telling me it's better? And one of the things I noticed was that a lot of the professional review sites, not like the crappy, AI generated ones, that the ones that have real people writing real important, real information, they actually refuse to compare the two cameras. Like, they just said that we simply will not do a comparison review between these two because they're actually not even remotely the same tool. They're not designed to do the same thing. They've not spec'd up to do the same thing. This is not even like, this is like comparing a Ferrari with a really high quality van, like,
hang on, which one's which? Which one's which?
Not important. But the thing is, it's like, it doesn't need to be all that the Sony's. Like, people go, oh, the autofocus isn't as fast. And you're like, cool, but no one bought it for that. The file sizes are huge. Great. Well, that's why I bought it. The camera body's bigger. That's because it's got a bigger sensor, and the lens mount is bloody huge. So it's not the same camera, and it's not meant to be either.
You want my hot take, though? My hot take on that situation right there is it's a compliment to Fujifilm and GFX that there is that conversation about comparisons, because previously we weren't saying how does the Canon 5D Mark III compared to the latest Phase 1?
Exactly.
Because they were so different tools. That was not something that people weren't. I mean, maybe some weirdo wrote that review, and good on them, because that's pretty funny. But it wasn't a mainstream sort of question. Now the Fujifilm have narrowed the gap so much with autofocus and that kind of stuff in these systems that it is becoming a question. And it's probably right to still say, hey, they're very different tools. They suit different purposes. But the fact that you could do a comparison between those two cameras, it just says Fujifilm have made a lot of leaps forward in that tech. Yeah.
But also, like, I mean, I said before, like, actually, I think the A1's actually got even a slightly better dynamic range than the GFX by like a hair, which is weird. And I thought that, because I've not had that experience myself. My experience is actually the opposite. But it turns out that actually where you see the difference is not about what dynamic range specifically it captures, but it's how it captures it. It's about how it protects those shadows and how it protects the color and the detail in those shadows. Mm-hmm. How do you put that into a really tangible review? There's no tool that sort of measures that, I don't think. I mean, you can do the distribution of a dynamic range and stuff like that, but then you've got to add in the fact that, well, it's twice as many megapixels, so which one's got a better grain pattern? Well, are you comparing them at their original resolution, or are you comparing them just visually side by side? Are you comparing the sharpness of that lens with the sharpness of this lens? Like, the thing I love about the Fuji lens is it's a little bit like the Apple ecosystem, where you go, you can't buy a crap lens for Fuji GFX because they only made them for cameras that can shoot 100 megapixels. But you can buy a crap Sony lens for your high-end Sony camera. You can also buy ridiculously good lenses, but you don't have the choice with GFX. So it's kind of like, when you start comparing these two tools, there's so many discrepancies. It's almost like, it's just not worth it, when you know that you want a camera like that, and you shouldn't. I probably shouldn't have even been looking up that review, because it was, even if I got the answer that I wanted, it probably was completely irrelevant to what I was actually asking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, can I ask a self-serving question then?
Yeah.
Your show.
What?
Yeah, true.
What would make camera reviews great? Because we want to somehow do camera reviews on this channel in our Camera Life ecosystem. And there's a lot out there already. We don't need to do the same stuff that's already being done. What value could we add here?
The only thing that I reckon that is actually a really, really genuinely useful comparison of a camera or a review of a camera is to have a very consistent comparison shot between two models, one that's a relatable model and one that's not. So as an example, if you took a tripod and it had a double head on it, and you put your Sony A1 and your GFX camera with the same focal length, with the same settings, with the same spec lens, as in like you use the most professional Sony version of that lens and the most professional GFX version of that lens.
Mm-hmm.
You shoot them side by side with the exact same exposures, and you load those two photos onto somewhere where people can download them and play with them in Lightroom and see the push and pull of that data. Because that lets you make actual decisions about what you're looking at. Whereas the amount of times I see people going, oh, I took the Sony out to do this, and on this day it was a bit overcast, but still we got the idea. And then this day we took the Canon out and it was really sunny. And you're like, well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
The ISO performance is wildly different. The motion
Yeah.
blur wildly different. The contrast wildly different. The like a million variables that mean you can't compare it. So they have to literally be shot side by side with the exact same everything to have any real valid view. Because otherwise, like as we've discovered with the 100, the GFX 100 RF, is that like I don't like that camera. I think it's rubbish. I think it's like such a poor design that is the first iteration of what could be great. But then I know that other people don't believe that. They think it's amazing. They love it. They've got all these things. And the reason that we have this discrepancy in the view is that for me, I buy a 100 megapixel camera because I want 100 megapixels. So the cropping part, and people go, oh, you can use zoom by cropping. Well, why would I do that when I want the 100 megapixels? For them, it's not a problem. I want to shoot at 1/8 of a second in street photography because I love that motion blur. They don't. So that's not a problem for them. It's so personalized as to why we like things. And the reality is no one makes a crap camera these days. You just simply can't afford to. So it's all a matter of subjectivity. So what you need to do is make it really objective and go, no, this is the exact same thing done the exact same way. You want to do a handheld, how slow can you hand hold it with the IBIS test? They need to be shot not just at the same day at the same time. You need to have them set up on the same rig, so that you've got the same level of handshake at that exact same moment. Otherwise, maybe you were just a little more stable in the next shot, because that could be the difference between doubling or tripling its performance.
Interesting.
That would be my take on it. It has to be very scientific. That's what I used to love about Imaging Resource. They used to have such a great scientific method of looking at how sharp lenses were. There was no, I like this, I like that. It was all like no, this is what it does, and this is how it performs.
And it was consistent every time.
So consistent. Yeah. That's where I think it's that's where it's at.
Okay. I like it.
Nice.
Yeah.
What else? There's Dennis. Dennis says 97.6% of camera reviews are clickbait rubbish by people who don't use the gear.
Which we've been accused of doing.
Yeah.
Should I read that? I think I should read that comment out. You can respond to it specifically, Matt. All right, here we go. Sorry to this guy because we're calling him out again, but I love it. At David Walker 2402 says, a lot of BS here. People have been using the much loved X100 for many years without any IBIS. How did those photographers manage to? Are you now saying that cameras without IBIS are obsolete and have never produced sharp images? No. There is also real difference in detail and absolute sharp. In fact, I see more photographers dumbing down the sharpness because it's becoming ridiculous and the digital look is just awful. My guess is none of you have even tested the camera.
Cool. My answer would be that I did test the camera. I played with it for like a week just after Greg had it. In fact, he shipped it to me.
I've got a photo of your name and address on the box.
Second part of that, I'd say, is that the reality is that you're probably right. A lot of photographers are dumbing down the sharpness. I mean, it's why we're getting lo-fi cameras as well. I mean, hell, look how many cameras have they're literally using lomography lenses on them to try and get, I think that's what it's called, lomography, isn't it? When they use the old shit
Lomography
plastic.
is a brand. Yeah.
Just so that they get these like vintage looks.
It's called the Greg Carrick effect.
100, but you know what? That's awesome. But you know what? If you're buying a 100 megapixel camera, you're not buying it so you can have unsharp versions of it. It doesn't make any sense. And yes, you have got tons of sharp images. In fact, I've got some spectacular images I'm really happy with out of the GFX RF. Did it need IBIS? No, because I was at faster shutter speeds. But it does limit me when I want to use slow shutter speeds, which in my style, if I'm doing nature stuff and I'll do some waterfalls, that's really detrimental to me. I can't do a handheld waterfall shot. I want to do street photography where I get motion. Can't do those handheld at 1/8 of a second. A colleague of mine, Nick Fletcher, he
Nick, before you say that, Nick just said, "Gosh, I went away and came back, and he's still banging on 2 hours later. Welcome to my life." Anyway, what about Nick?
Nick bought the VFX 100 RF on the weekend, and I said to him, because he took it out for a walk around Croydon at the camera house thing, and he goes, "No, I really love it." And I said, "Well," he goes, "you can do slow shutters with it." I said, "Well, what's a slow shutter?" He goes, "I shot at 1/60th." And for him, that's exactly what he needs. He wants a 1/60th of a shot. I don't. I want an 1/8. So I don't think that what the guy who was having that rant on YouTube is wrong. No, yes, of course you can produce fantastic images without IBIS. That's of course you can. But can you get the same versatility? And what I was saying is that in a camera that I'm spending that much money on, I want some versatility, you know? So, yeah. And see, Nick says I'm so wrong. I'm so wrong because we have such a different style. Like, I take really beautiful artistic shots and Nick takes like holiday snaps. And so there's obviously different cameras for different people. Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, that's funny. I can't wait. If we eventually will one day hope to get Nick on the podcast, and he might be able to give us.
You might qualify.
He might be able to give us his hands-on thoughts.
I worded him up on the weekend. He will be joining us soon. So, and then I think what we might do is get Nick and Matt on together in the lead up to BFOP.
In the lead up to BFOP.
The GFX
we'll set aside, some appropriate buffer time should the show go over.
Yeah.
Just to ease the tension between Matt and Nick, Cam Blake says, "I shoot OM system. What's sharpness?" I don't know.
You know what though? Like, this is the other thing I'm going to throw out there is that, this guy, whoever it was, saying, everyone's dumbing the sharpness down. I think universally that is not true. I think that most cameras are going, wow, I want a lens that's ultra sharp. And I agree with that some lenses lack character. But I think that for most photographers, they want a sharp image still. I agree you could over sharpen it, that's for sure. But you know what? You might have 10 friends out of a world of millions of people. That does not make an industry. And I think when we comment on this kind of a podcast, I think we're probably talking about what is an industry talking about? What does the average user want? Because I'll be honest, camera brands can't afford to make a camera for 1 or 2 people, or for 1 million, or for 1,000 people. They need to make 100,000 of these cameras and sell them around. So
and I think the other thing,
it's not about your personal circumstances. It's the broad big picture of going at that price point. How many of these are going to sell? I think it was probably short-sighted, and I think version 2 will be better.
And the other thing about dumbing down sharpness is that yes, that's what we're seeing, because it's that whole social media influencer effect. We're getting these people with these mass followings that are putting out photos that are interesting and artistic because they're applying filters over them and they're softening them and whatever else. And that's what we see. We don't see a lot of, unless you're specifically, in that algorithm of seeing just solid photographers. Of course, all we're going to see is this sort of unsharp, filtered.
I've rarely seen someone go into a gallery and be like, "Wow, I love that landscape. It's so soft."
Yeah.
I think
that filter.
I believe that most people, you're going to buy wall art or you're going to sell to a client. Like a client, if you send them soft images, they're going to go, "Why is it out of focus?" That's the reality. And so, as a personal project, I mean, I've been to the MGA, they've got some weird art exhibitions with photography, and I'm like, how is that art? That's not my call to make. Like in my brain, that's what I do. That doesn't mean I'm going to shoot that or aspire towards it. Yet they've won a $10,000 prize or a $100,000 prize for it. We all shoot differently. We all have different opinions. I think when we talk about camera brands, though, you just got to keep it high level. We're talking about what is the mass appeal to something.
Mindful of time, because I know you've got a very, very busy life and lots of things probably to do today.
Talk about me on that.
Also running out of interesting.
No, never. There's actually a million things I want to talk about that we haven't got to. But what I would like to quickly talk about is what have you got going on this year when it comes, very quickly, you don't have to dig into too deep, when it comes to workshops. Is there anything that's not booked out that people that are listening might want to check out on your website when it comes to workshops and stuff come to mind? And then also, can you give us any little teasers on the Bright Photography Festival for 2025?
Workshops, run them year round, tons up there. I think I've got my workshops planned out to the end of the year on the website, so there's always stuff to look at. I've got a advanced Lightroom workshop on Sunday. I think I've got one spot on that. 2026 South Africa in November. I've got a couple of spots left for that. The June, July, August. So the July, August ones are sold out, and this year's November's out. I've got some new workshops I'm working on at the moment, but my focus at the moment is to start building the online platform as well. So that'll hopefully be coming thick and fast at some point. BFOP wise, to be honest, I'm not sure there are that many tidbits to give away at this point. We're sort of in that we're in the phase now where we're getting some of our logistics down pat. Both Nick and I are reaching out to a lot of instructors, both old and new. We've got a few new people that we're in chats with at the moment, some really fantastic landscape photographers. Yep, Sony is coming as far as I know. Philip.
Good question, Philip.
We have, just in that early organisation phase. I suspect by the time we hit like mid-June, late June, we'll have a better idea as to some of the more specific things. But at this stage, we're the festival sold out like late last year. There's about 150 tickets on back order at the moment. So if you're joining the wait list now, you may probably be a little bit too late. The only other big news, Cam Blake isn't coming this year because he has found fame elsewhere, and I think he might be in jail for his drone workshops, so he's not coming either. But anyway, but most of our crew's there. Mika Boynton's back. Matt Palmer's coming up this year, I believe. Or coming out, they live up there. We've got some new faces as well, and some returning faces after a bit of an absence. So there's lots and lots and lots of people. Obviously, Dennis is going to be there. It's an exciting festival. I think Nick and I have both got a real focus this year on trying to consolidate things a little bit and get a bit more structure as to how things sort of run within workshops. And so you can probably expect to see slightly more structured workshops in some cases. A lot of them are already quite well structured, but some of them getting a bit more around that. Speaking to a couple of filmy people as well. But yeah.
Filmy people?
Specifics. Yeah, there's something really cool we're working on at the moment, but I don't have enough information to actually talk about it, to be honest.
Excellent. Excellent.
But yeah, it should be fun. I'm really excited about the about where it's all going. We've got a lot of industry support. Camera House has been a huge supporter. They're helping us with a lot of the brands, and even the brands are really on board with it this year, which makes life a lot easier, but also a lot more interesting for those who are attending, because the opportunities that they're bringing now, the little internal competition that we've started between them all means that they're having to one-up each other, which is good for all of us. It's good.
Nice.
Yeah, that's really good. What else? Is there anything else that we need to talk about? Brendan Waits in the chat says, get on the bus.
Yeah, there'll be a bus. There'll be the bus.
The big bus trip.
I don't think so. Look, I think we've covered my life. Oh, we didn't. Last time I wet the bed, probably would have been. Oh, look, I probably was too drunk to remember it, to be honest. So
last BFOP,
mid-20s maybe. But yeah, it's really great to get on here and really great to have a chat with you guys. And obviously, thanks for everyone who's listening either live or in the future. But yeah, I think that the big call out for me at the moment, I'm trying to encourage people to look at their photography, look back at it, slow down a little bit. I will add my monthly challenge if you're interested in joining. I've got a free monthly challenge. You can access it by my website under the Learn Photography. It's, you don't get put on mailing lists. You'll be on the list for that challenge, so you'll get the notifications. But it's not a big marketing system. We do that once a month. It's on, I think the next one's next Wednesday night or next Tuesday night. So you can join that if you like. But yeah, that's pretty much the only news in my world. And just encourage people to slow down a bit with their photography. I think we're starting to get to that cutthroat, breakneck pace with technology and, everything needing to be more and more on social media. And, I think a lot of the topics we've discussed today kind of highlight the need to take it a bit slower, do the things that you're obviously passionate about, and be a bit sensible about what you produce as well. Make sure what you do you're proud of.
I love it.
Stellar advice.
Final question on BFOP. Old Jay Shani, who is actually JS Hanny, but is Pentax going?
Look, not that I'm aware of, although I think Pentax is distributed by CR Kennedy and they are coming. So I might be able to get them to bring up their infamous left-handed camera to display.
Nice.
Nice.
Museum piece. Well, look, on that note, I think we'll wrap up, yeah, boss.
That was, what a show. Could keep going
Yeah,
for
what a
hours.
show.
It's been tons of people listening and watching and in the live chat. So thank you, everyone, for sticking with us.
Yeah, thanks for commenting. And look, if you are watching this later, you've missed the live show, you've got other responsibilities, how dare you? And you do watch, make sure you comment. We're going to get to your comments on Monday night's random photography show. We've got some great guests coming up in the coming weeks. Let me just have a quick look about who we've got. We've got Andrew Ravenko. We've got Lucinda Goodwin. We've got Peter Mellows is also joining us. Craig Watson, who I think was Craig commenting today. No, it was Craig Murphy. Sorry, Craig. Anyway, make sure you like and subscribe and tickle the bell so that you get notifications for all of those upcoming guests, as well as our Monday night random photography show where we talk news, industry news. We talk about what we're working on. We look at photos and we just unravel the mysteries of our craft. But look, on that note, this has been the Camera Life podcast, proudly brought to you by Lucky Straps out of Bendigo, Victoria, makers of fine leather camera straps, the finest leather camera straps. Head to luckystraps.com and use code Greg for a healthy discount.
No, use code Justin. Don't use code Greg. It is a competition.
And don't forget to...
Who's going to get a discount? That's the question.
They're the same. They're the same, but I can make mine more, and I probably will. Because I'm currently losing, which is ridiculous. I've got the longest name.
And don't forget to head to mattcruminsphotography.com.au. And just on that note, thank you, Matt, for joining us and giving so much of your time, advice and wisdom, hard-earned advice and wisdom. And I think I've certainly learned some stuff about, I've always struggled with the business side of photography. And clearly, because my office/studio is in the corner of my son's room, I'm clearly not charging enough. But look, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you once again. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having us, and thanks for everyone watching along.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Cam, Matt. Thanks, Nick, Dennis, Philip, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And
we'll play out the music and we'll see you Monday night. Bye, everybody.